Chapter 4062. Not long after, a man in black descended above the ruins, exuding a shocking, murderous aura, as if he was a demon god that had walked out of a sea of corpses. Looking at the scene in front of him, his face sank. "Lord!" Old Master Wang and the others hurriedly flew over and bowed. "Where are they?" The man in black asked. He had rushed over after receiving the message for help. "They're gone." Old Master Wang was in great pain. "Where did they go?" The man in black frowned. "I don't know." Everyone shook their heads. The man in black clenched his fists and asked, "Are there any casualties in Haoyu City?" Old Master Wang shook his head and said, "The casualties are nothing, but our spirit vein and crystal vein were all snatched away by them." "Who said there were no casualties?" "The city lord and the young city lord died in their hands." One of the commanders roared, "What? The city lord is dead?" The man in black was shocked. "Yes, not long ago they were killed outside the city, leaving only a headless corpse." Wang Biu nodded, her face full of grief. "Preposterous!" The man in black was furious and asked, "Who are they?" "I don't know." Old Master Wang shook his head and suddenly said, "But one of them seems to have mastered a method similar to the God Race mark." "A method similar to the God Race mark?" The man in black was stunned. "Yes." Old Master Wang nodded, thinking of how the other party only relied on one death law ultimate profound to crush their 5 ultimate profound. His scalp couldn't help but go numb. "Similar to the God Race mark," the man in black murmured. As if suddenly thinking of something, he hurriedly asked, "What do they look like? And what does the mark look like?" Old Master Wang waved his hand, and Qin Feiyang and Madman's shadows appeared. The man in black immediately sized up Qin Feiyang and Madman. Qin Feiyang and Madman had changed their appearances. Even if the man in black knew them, he definitely wouldn't be able to recognize them now. However, the man in black's gaze quickly locked onto the mark of all evil between Madman's eyebrows. His eyes filled with surprise. After a while, he took out the divine sound transmission stone. Buzz! A figure quickly appeared. It was the old man in black who followed the human race's supreme. "Great Paragon." The man in black bowed respectfully. "Greetings, great venerable." Old Man Wang and the others knelt respectfully in the air. "Is something the matter?" The black-robed old man asked, "Great venerable, there's something I'd like to ask you." The black-clothed man turned the divine sound transmission stone and asked Qin Feiyang and the madman's phantoms, "Have you seen this mark before?" The black-clothed old man looked at the mark between the madman's brows, and his gaze shook slightly as he said with surprise, "Isn't that the mark of all evil? I've heard about it from Lord Supreme. Seal of all evil." The man in black was shocked and asked, "Then isn't he a madman?" "That's right. He's a lunatic." The old man in black nodded and asked in a deep voice, "You have news about him?" "Yes. Previously, they changed their appearances and appeared in Bright Moon City. They killed the city lord and his son, and even stole all of Bright Moon City's spirit veins and crystal veins. But now he has already left. His whereabouts are unknown." The man in black said, "Since they appeared in Bright Moon City, it means that they have always been in the West Continent. Send more people to find them, but remember, don't fight them head-on. You're no match for them," the old man in black warned. "Understood." The man in black turned off the transmission stone and looked at Qin Feiyang and the madman's shadows again with a trace of fear in his eyes. He had never thought that it was this group of people who came to Bright Moon City to commit murder. Old Man Wang immediately asked, "My lord, is the madman you and the great venerable talking about the madman from the sky cloud field?" "That's right." The man in black nodded. "It's them." In an instant, everyone's faces were filled with shock. The name of Qin Feiyang and the others had already spread throughout the divine kingdom. Not only did they snatch the gate of the divine kingdom, but they also successfully escaped from the pursuit of the king and the others. Now, the reason why the major cities were so heavily guarded was because they were looking for these people. But they had never thought that Bright Moon City would be so unlucky to become the first target of these people. The man in black was silent for a while, then he looked at Old Man Wong and asked, "You are?" Old Man Wong hurriedly said, "I'm the head of the Wong family in Bright Moon City, Wong Danian." "Wong Danian," the man in black pondered for a while and asked, "You're Wong Chuan's father?" Yes. Wong Danian nodded and pulled Wong Biun. "This is my daughter, Biun, and also Chuan, her sister. The dead city lord and his son are Biun's husband and father-in-law." "My lord, you must uphold justice for me," Wong Biun cried. This was really an unexpected disaster. "Wong Chuan and I are friends, so I will definitely help if I can." The man in black comforted her and sighed. "But I really can't help with this matter. You may not know the strength of these people. Not to mention me, even the Great Venerable and the others are not necessarily a match for Qin Feiyang and the others. So my condolences." Wong Biun's eyes trembled. "Sigh." The man in black sighed and looked at Wong Danian. "Bright Moon City is now without a leader. I hope Uncle Wong can temporarily take over the role of city lord to rebuild Bright Moon City and stabilize the order of Bright Moon City. It's my duty." Wong Danian nodded. "Thank you, but you don't have to worry. Qin Feiyang and the others' goal should be the crystal vein and the soul vein, so they may not come to Bright Moon City again in the future. As for the soul vein and crystal vein you lost, I will report it to the Great Venerable. At that time, the Great Venerable will think of a way for you." The man in black smiled. "Thank you, my lord. Also, thank the Great Venerable for us." Everyone said gratefully. The man in black waved his hand, looked at the disappointed Wong Biun, and comforted, "My condolences." After saying that, he turned and left. At the same time, in the depths of a mountain, there was an ancient hall. Inside the hall, at this moment, a middle-aged man in a golden robe was sitting on top. Below, the old man in black stood respectfully and was talking about what happened in Bright Moon City. The middle-aged man was the human race's supreme. The old man in black was the Great Venerable. After a while, after the Great Venerable finished talking, he looked up at the Supreme and asked, "My lord, what do you think of this matter?" The Supreme frowned and said, "They only took the soul vein and crystal vein and didn't start a massacre. It seems that they didn't want to massacre the city. I guess they don't dare to massacre the city." The Great Venerable smiled. "Don't dare? With their strength, what else do they not dare to do? Moreover, with the damage our divine kingdom has caused to the Sky Cloud realm, even if they massacre the city, we have nothing to say. I can only say that there is a trace of kindness in their hearts." The human race's supreme said. The Great Venerable was slightly stunned and asked carefully, "Listening to what you said, it seems that you appreciate them? Putting aside the grudges between the divine kingdom and the Sky Cloud realm, don't they deserve appreciation? In our divine kingdom, have you seen more outstanding young people than them?" The human race's supreme asked. The Great Venerable lowered his head, and the geniuses of the divine kingdom kept flashing through his mind. He shook his head and said, "No. Wait, aren't there those few? If they take action, they can definitely compete with Qin Feiyang and the others." "Those few," the human race's supreme murmured and sighed. "Even the monarch, the divine king, and I can't order them to take action. It's difficult to expect them to take action." Hearing this, the Great Venerable looked a little helpless. "As for the death of Hao Yu City's city lord and his son, there's a saying that flies don't bite a seamless egg. Everyone in Hao Yu City is fine except for the two of them, and they died outside the city. There must be another reason." The Supreme speculated, as expected of the human race's Supreme. He didn't even ask anyone to investigate, and he could see the clues. Do you need me to send someone to investigate? The Great Venerable asked. Don't worry. What we need to do now is to find them quickly. If we let them continue like this, the West Continent will fall into chaos sooner or later. The human race's supreme rubbed his forehead, feeling very tired. Even if they found them, what could they do? Unless they found a chance to encircle and annihilate them. Even if they met face to face, as the human race's supreme, he wouldn't be able to stop these young people. Buzz! At this moment, the divine voice-transmitting stone rang. The Great Venerable hurriedly took it out, and another black-robed man appeared. What's the matter? The Great Venerable frowned. The black-robed man said in a deep voice, I just received news that Cold Wind City was robbed, and all the spirit and crystal veins were taken away. What? The Great Venerable exclaimed. How long had it been? Another city was robbed? The human race's supreme asked. Was it Qin Feiyang and the others? I don't know. It's said that 2 unfamiliar faces did it, but one of them has the same means as the god race's mark. He crushed all the overlords in Cold Wind City with just 2 ultimate profound laws. The black-robed man said. It seems to be them. The human race's supreme shook his head helplessly. The black-robed man was stunned for a moment, then asked in surprise, You mean that mark is the mark of all evil? Yes. The human race's supreme nodded. What are they doing? The black-robed man was furious. The Great Venerable glanced at the human race's supreme, then looked at the black-robed man and asked, Are there any casualties in Cold Wind City? No. Apart from the spirit and crystal veins, there are no injuries. I even heard that before snatching the spirit and crystal veins, they even asked the people of Cold Wind City to evacuate in advance, as if they didn't want to hurt them. The black-robed man frowned. The way these people did things was really hard to fathom. Okay, continue to keep an eye on them and let us know immediately if there's any news. The Great Venerable ordered. Yes, the black-robed man nodded, and the shadow quickly disappeared. The Great Venerable pondered for a while, put away the divine voice-transmitting stone, and looked up at the human race's supreme, saying, It seems that their goal is indeed only the spirit and crystal veins. But why are they collecting so many spirit and crystal veins? Could it be for the Sky Cloud Realm? I've been to the Sky Cloud Realm, and the Sky Cloud Realm doesn't lack spirit and crystal veins. The human race's supreme shook his head. That's strange. The Great Venerable frowned. They'll definitely take action again. The human race's supreme thought for a while, then looked at the Great Venerable and said, You 10 venerables, go to the major cities and see if you can meet them. If you meet them, don't attack them, but politely invite them to Mount Supreme as guests. Guests? The Great Venerable was stunned. Wasn't this inviting a wolf into the house? Besides, Mount Supreme was the most sacred place in the West Continent and also their headquarters. In the eyes of the other party, this must be a dangerous place. Facing such a situation, would they agree to come? Yes, guests. I'll have a good talk with them. The human race's supreme nodded. I'll do my best. The Great Venerable took a deep breath, nodded, and then turned around and left quickly. Chapter 4063. Half a month passed. A total of 50 cities in the West Continent had been plundered. This matter caused a sensation in the entire divine kingdom. For a time, the members of the god race and the purple-gold divine dragon race all came to the West Continent to watch the show. But the sea race and beast race of the East Continent were very quiet, as if it had nothing to do with them. On this day, Qin Feiyang and Madman arrived in the sky above another city. In the divine kingdom, this city could be considered a mid-tier city. However, it was several times larger than the major cities in the Sky Cloud Realm. This was the difference. Cities like Cloud Sea City and Wind Sea City could only be considered medium-sized cities in the Divine Kingdom. It's them. Now, everyone could recognize Qin Feiyang and Madman at a glance. Stop! Accompanied by a shout, a middle-aged man flew out from the city and landed in front of Qin Feiyang and Madman. Looking at this middle-aged man, Qin Feiyang and Madman's pupils immediately constricted. This person was about 8 meters tall and as thin as a match. His hair was half white and half black, and his eyes were deep, giving him a gloomy feeling. Moreover, this person's aura was very strong, and even Qin Feiyang and Madman could feel a sense of danger. Obviously, he was definitely a terrifying expert. The middle-aged man said, "I am the third venerable of Mount Supreme. I hope the two of you can show mercy." This third venerable had been waiting here for half a month, and finally Qin Feiyang and Madman arrived. However, facing Qin Feiyang and Madman, he was also a little nervous. Mount Supreme. Third venerable? Madman was stunned. Mount Supreme is the highest place in the West Continent, and it is also the residence of the human race's sovereign, and there are 10 venerables under the human race's sovereign. These 10 people, regardless of strength or status, are the strongest existences in the West Continent, excluding the human race's sovereign. It seems they all have the will of the heavenly Tao. Qin Feiyang sized up the third venerable while explaining to Madman, "You're so familiar with the West Continent in such a short time, as expected of a monster from the Sky Cloud realm." Third venerable's voice was a little hoarse. At first glance, it sounded like the voice of a demon, causing people to unconsciously feel a sense of panic. "You flatter me. However, Lord Third Venerable didn't wait for us here just to prevent us from looting the crystal vein and the soul line, did he?" Qin Feiyang smiled. The Third Venerable looked at Qin Feiyang in astonishment. He was too smart. He asked, "Who are you guys?" Qin Feiyang and Madman looked at each other and consumed a face-restoring pill. Soon, their faces were restored. Qin Feiyang, lunatic. Third Venerable's pupils shrank. Compared to the other geniuses of the Sky Cloud realm, he was most afraid of Qin Feiyang. This was because Qin Feiyang not only had 3,000 incarnations and the Eye of Heaven, but he also had the will of the heavenly Tao, the ultimate profundity of the laws of life and death. Others might not be clear, but he was very clear. Even the human sovereign's sort of faith couldn't stop him. He was also very strong, but he wasn't confident at all when facing Qin Feiyang. They are Qin Feiyang and Madman. So they don't have 3 heads and 6 arms. But why are they so strong? The people in the city below looked at the two of them curiously. "Old Qin, could there be an ambush here?" Madman asked as he looked around vigilantly. "Don't worry. If there was an ambush, this third venerable wouldn't be standing here and chatting with us." Qin Feiyang thought to himself. Third venerable took a deep breath and looked at Qin Feiyang and Madman. "Under Lord Sovereign's orders, I'm here to invite the two of you to Mount Supreme as guests." What? They're inviting them to Mount Supreme as guests? Everyone was shocked. This was a great honor. For all the living beings in the West Continent, Mount Supreme was a holy land that they dreamed of. Logically speaking, shouldn't they be suppressed immediately? Why would they be invited to Mount Supreme? And it was an invitation from Lord Sovereign. Qin Feiyang and Madman were also very surprised by this invitation, because they never thought of it that way. "Senior brother, is this a trap?" Qin Feiyang asked secretly. It was too abnormal. If they were here to kill them, they would believe it unconditionally. However, the fact that they were invited to Mount Supreme as guests was a bit hard to fathom. Who knows if it's a trap? Madman pursed his lips, but suddenly, his eyes lit up and he sent a voice transmission. Could it be that the human sovereign wants to ask for peace? Ask for peace? Qin Feiyang was stunned and shook his head. "That's impossible. We only looted a few dozen cities, spirit veins and crystal veins. It shouldn't be enough for him to ask for peace. Only..." Madman's mouth twitched. In the past half a month, Each city had at least 5 to 600,000 spirit veins and crystal veins. 50 cities, how many would that be? 20 to 30 million. It was much more than the original spirit veins and crystal veins of the Black Tortoise realm. Even for the Divine Kingdom, 20 to 30 million spirit veins and crystal veins was not a small loss. I really don't know why this guy dared to say the word, only. If the human sovereign heard it, he would probably vomit blood from anger. What do the two of you think? Third Venerable's attitude was very polite, as if he was inviting a distinguished guest. Madman glanced at Third Venerable and thought, "Why don't we go and take a look?" No rush. Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and waved his hand. The law of death and the law of karma surged out. Seeing this, Third Venerable thought that Qin Feiyang was going to attack him and instinctively retreated. But in the end, he saw the power of the two laws surging towards the city below. Leave the city immediately or bear the consequences. Qin Feiyang said. Hearing this, most of the people in the city immediately ran out of the city. But there was also a small number of people who relied on the presence of Third Venerable and had nothing to fear. There were even some people who grasped the ultimate meaning, who ran out to clamor. "You want to die? I'll grant your wish." Madman's eyes flashed with killing intent as the mark of all evil appeared between his eyebrows. "Quickly leave the city." Third Venerable saw that the situation was bad and hurriedly shouted, "You want us to leave? Did I hear wrong? Is this something that the Third Venerable should say? Are we just going to watch them do whatever they want?" Many people expressed their dissatisfaction. Third Venerable was also helpless. How to stop them? Qin Feiyang's means are not something you can imagine. If they don't withdraw quickly, they will all be buried here. "I really don't accept this." A burly man rushed out and activated two ultimate meanings. One ultimate meaning, one ordinary meaning. Let me take a look too. How strong are they? Even the dignified Third Venerable has to hold back. A few more people ran out, all of them grasping ultimate meanings. There was even one person who grasped three ultimate meanings, one ultimate meaning and two ordinary meaning. If such strength was placed in the sky cloud realm, they would be known by everyone. However, in the Divine Kingdom they were unknown. If you want to see our strength, you will have to pay a price. Madman chuckled. His 7-foot body instantly turned into a 10,000-foot tall giant. This scene made Third Venerable's eyelids twitch uncontrollably, because this was the first time he saw Madman after his transformation. The berserk aura emitted from his body made people's hair stand on end. Madman punched out. Boom! The ultimate meanings were like withered trees that couldn't withstand a single blow and were instantly shattered. Even the ultimate meaning of the ultimate meaning was the same. There was no fighting power at all, because only the God race mark could contend with the root of all evil. So strong! The people who ran out of the city looked at Madman's huge body in shock. The few people who were clamoring were also dumbfounded. This is Madman's strength? It is indeed terrifying. Not daring to continue being arrogant, they turned around and ran out of the city. I said, "You will have to pay the price." Madman slapped out, and his huge hand covered the sky. Boom! At this moment, a powerful aura suddenly erupted like a volcano. The owner of this aura was Third Venerable. A river of stars fell from the sky, emitting an aura that could destroy heaven and earth. This was the ultimate meaning of the space-time law. Moreover, it also erupted with the will of the heavenly Tao. He couldn't leave them in the lurch, so he chose to make a move. However, he didn't really have the intention to fight. Otherwise, he wouldn't have just activated one ultimate meaning. He just wanted to stop Madman and save those people. But Madman didn't care at all. His huge hand crazily fell, and those people couldn't help but scream in despair. Boom! Their bodies were shattered on the spot. Madman grabbed their divine souls and turned to look at Third Venerable. Those huge eyes were like two blood moons, causing Third Venerable's scalp to go numb. Don't hurt their divine souls. Third Venerable's face darkened. The other ultimate meaning of the ultimate meaning were also restless. But at this moment, here, an even more terrifying aura erupted. Third Venerable's expression changed as he hurriedly looked at Qin Feiyang. He saw a huge nation floating above Qin Feiyang. It was the ultimate meaning of the life and death law. The nation of life and death. Boom! The nation of life and death shattered the sky and blasted towards the river of stars. The two immediately collapsed in the void. Third Venerable's pupils constricted. Although the two ultimate meanings were evenly matched, he knew that Qin Feiyang had already shown mercy. Because Qin Feiyang didn't activate the will of the heavenly Tao. If he did, it would definitely be a one-sided situation. At the same time, the power of the ultimate meaning of the life and death law also deeply shocked him. His ultimate meaning of the space-time law was supported by the will of the heavenly Tao. But even so, his ultimate meaning of the life and death law was comparable to it. It was ridiculously strong. Don't attack again. Otherwise, even if you are Third Venerable, I will still kill you. Qin Feiyang said, never looking at Third Venerable. But Third Venerable still felt a bone-piercing sharpness and couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Was this the Qin Feiyang of the Sky Cloud realm? With this kind of strength, apart from the rulers, who else could compete with him? The people outside the city finally saw the strength of Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist. They were all shocked. Needless to say, the divine souls in the mad scientist's hand were trembling non-stop. Senior brother, give them a way out. Qin Feiyang looked at the mad scientist and smiled. I don't intend to kill them. I just want to teach them a lesson. The mad scientist bared his teeth. His hand loosened. The divine souls immediately fled for their lives. This lesson was really not ordinary. It would probably leave a shadow in their hearts for the rest of their lives. Chapter 4064. The Third Supremacy also let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, they didn't die otherwise, as a supremacy of Mount Supreme. He would have no face in the future. At this moment, Qin Feiyang waved his hand and took away all the spirit veins and crystal veins. No one dared to stop him. Even the Third Supremacy could only stare. The Third Supremacy took a deep breath and looked at the two of them. Now, can you follow me to Mount Supreme? Crazy was about to speak, but Qin Feiyang reached out and stopped him. He looked at the Third Supremacy and smiled. No rush. We'll meet in Qingtian City in 3 days. With that, he turned around and left with Madman without looking back. Qingtian City? The Third Supremacy raised his eyebrows. They still want to rob Qingtian City. The people outside the city were also in an uproar. So unscrupulous is there any law? This is simply bullying. A moment later, outside the city, in the sky above a mountain, Crazy looked at Qin Feiyang suspiciously and asked, What do you mean? Why did you say that we're going to Qingtian City in public? Don't say anything. Qin Feiyang transmitted his voice. Then he swept his gaze over the surrounding void without batting an eyelid. Crazy was stunned and immediately became vigilant. He asked, Someone is following us? We can't rule out this possibility. After all, even the Third Supremacy has personally appeared. Moreover, we can't be careless with the next plan. After Qin Feiyang finished speaking, he released his divine sense without any warning, covering the entire area with it. Immediately, a cold light flashed in his eyes as he turned around and looked at the void behind him. There really is someone. Madman was shocked and immediately released his divine sense towards the void behind him. As expected, there was a spatial divine item hidden in the void a few miles away. The owner of the spatial divine item also realized that the two of them had discovered it and immediately controlled the spatial divine item to turn around and escape. Crazy snorted and chased after it like lightning, throwing a punch at the spatial divine item. With a loud crack, the spatial divine item shattered on the spot, and a black-clothed man fell out in a sorry state. This person was 7 feet tall and had a cold face. His 2 thick black eyebrows were like sharp swords that emitted an invisible sharpness. But at this moment, his eyes were filled with panic. He never thought that these 2 people would be so vigilant. "Who are you?" Madman stepped forward and blocked the black-robed man. Qin Feiyang also took a step forward and stood behind the black-clothed man. "Don't misunderstand. I don't mean any harm." The black-clothed man hurriedly waved his hand. "You don't have any ill intentions. Why are you following us?" Madman sneered. "Really, I'm just following orders. Please have mercy on me." The black-clothed man was terrified. Although he had never seen the 2 of them before, as a member of the Supreme Palace, he had long heard of their deeds. Even the monarch was once defeated by Qin Feiyang. The Supreme Palace was a force founded by the supreme being of the human race, and there were many experts there. All the human tribes and all the major cities were under the jurisdiction of the Supreme Palace. It could be said that they had supreme authority. "I hate being followed the most." Madman's eyes flashed with killing intent. "Wait." Qin Feiyang reached out to stop Madman. He walked to Madman's side and sized up the black-clothed man. Facing Qin Feiyang, the black-clothed man was even more terrified. Madman's methods were terrifying, but in comparison, Qin Feiyang's methods were even more shocking. "You shouldn't be here under orders, right?" Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. "Huh." The black-clothed man looked at Qin Feiyang in surprise. "In other words, you are here for revenge." Qin Feiyang laughed. "This," the black-clothed man's eyes trembled. What was wrong with this person? He could actually see through his thoughts? "Old Qin, what do you mean?" Madman also looked at Qin Feiyang in confusion. "Senior brother, if you know his identity, you will know why I said that. He is Wang Chuan." The corner of Qin Feiyang's mouth lifted. "Wang Chuan?" Madman was stunned. Who was this person? But the black-clothed man's face was instantly filled with disbelief. How did he know his identity? Qin Feiyang smiled and said, "Wang Chuan, the son of old Master Wang, Wang Biu's elder brother, which is also Li Outyen's brother-in-law." So that's the case. Madman suddenly understood. They killed Li Outyen and his son. As his brother-in-law, Wang Chuan naturally wouldn't let it go. And this brother-in-law is also an enforcer of the Supreme Palace. He seems to have mastered 3 ultimate mysteries. One is the law of destruction, the law of earth, and the law of metal. Wang Chuan, am I wrong? Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chuan with a smile. Looking at this person, he couldn't help but have a thought in his mind. When Wang Chuan heard this, he couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He actually knew about his situation so well. It was as if he had specially investigated him. "Don't misunderstand. You are not qualified for us to investigate." Qin Feiyang waved his hand. Wang Chuan clenched his fists. He was too arrogant. After all, he was an enforcer of the Supreme Palace. Not convinced. Madman smiled and said, "I was wondering why the Wang family was so powerful to be able to help Li Outyen's father become the city, Lord of Haoyu City. It turns out that it was your power." Wang Chuan glanced at Madman, then looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Since you have already found out, then give me a quick death." "You want to die?" Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. "I won't kill you." Wang Chuan was surprised. Won't kill him? What did he mean? "To be honest, I sympathize with your sister. Not only did she marry a playboy, but she was also betrayed by him." Qin Feiyang smiled. "Betrayed?" Wang Chuan frowned. "You still don't know. Your brother-in-law had an affair with a dancer in the city, Lord's residence behind your sister's back. And he was very playful, running deep into the mountains and forests to find excitement. Madman looked at him mockingly. Impossible. Wang Chuan shook his head. He was sure that he looked down on Li Outyan. He didn't want to improve himself and was a typical playboy. However, he also knew Li Outyan's character. He definitely wouldn't dare to do something like betraying his sister. It seems that all of you were kept in the dark. We saw it with our own eyes. Speaking of which, you should thank us for helping you get rid of this scum. Madman snickered. How could this be? Wang Chuan muttered. This was simply too unexpected. It doesn't matter if you don't believe it. We told you this because we wanted to tell you that we didn't kill the innocent. Now, let's talk about the conditions for your life. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. What conditions? Wang Chuan asked. It's very simple. Take away your ultimate meaning of the law of destruction and give it to me. Qin Feiyang smiled. What? Wang Chuan's body trembled. He actually wanted his ultimate meaning of the law of destruction. One had to know. The reason why he could become a law enforcer of the Supreme Palace was mainly because he had mastered the ultimate meaning of the law of destruction. If he were to take it away, would he still be able to stay in the Supreme Palace? He would probably be kicked out on the spot. Madman also smiled in realization. Didn't Qin Feiyang also master the ultimate meaning of the law of destruction? Therefore, he targeted Wang Chuan's law. The ultimate meaning could be taken away. The reason why they didn't do this in the Sky Cloud realm was because they couldn't find anyone. Because there were too few people in the Sky Cloud realm who had mastered the ultimate meaning. As for people like Feather Emperor, Blood Ancestor, Little Rabbit, Long Chun, and Qi Xiaoyan, they couldn't do anything. But the Divine Kingdom was different. Here, there was no lack of ultimate meaning. In any random city, one could find 3 or 4 of them. As long as one was strong enough and ruthless enough, obtaining a few ultimate meaning inheritances was just a matter of minutes. However, it was definitely impossible to make someone willingly hand over the ultimate meaning. After all, the ultimate meaning wasn't just the strongest means. It also represented status and power. Losing the ultimate meaning was equivalent to instantly falling from heaven to hell, just like Wang Chuan at this moment. No matter what, he wasn't willing to hand it over to Qin Feiyang. If he was really forced, he would rather choose to self-destruct and destroy himself along with the ultimate meaning. The ultimate meaning is very precious, but no matter what, it can't be compared to life. As long as you can keep your life, no matter how much you lose, you can still get it back in the future. But if you lose your life, then no matter how much you have, it doesn't have much meaning. Am I right? Qin Feiyang looked at Wang Chuan with a smile. But in Wang Chuan's eyes, this smile was like a demon smiling at him. He couldn't help but feel apprehensive. Boom! The next moment, a destructive aura rushed out from his body. Sure enough, he chose to self-destruct. Damn it, you still dare to self-destruct? Madman was furious. The all-evil seal opened, accompanied by a scream, instantly shattering Wang Chuan's qi. Even if you kill me, I won't give it to you. Wang Chuan roared. You really think I don't dare to kill you? A cold light flashed in Madman's eyes as he slapped Wang Chuan's head. Wang Chuan sneered and closed his eyes, waiting for death. This scene made Madman helpless. He turned to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, "What do we do now?" Sigh. Qin Feiyang also sighed helplessly. This ultimate profound had to be done willingly. If the other party is unwilling, even if you put a knife on the other party's neck, it won't work, especially for someone like Wang Chuan who isn't afraid of death. As for forcibly taking it away, it was impossible to do that. The white-eyed wolf can do it, but after the white-eyed wolf takes it away, the ultimate meaning will disappear. This is a bit of a headache. Should we bring him to Soul-Sealing Valley? Madman asked. All right. Qin Feiyang nodded. No matter what, he must obtain the ultimate meaning of the law of destruction today. For someone like him who had 3,000 incarnations, Any additional ultimate intent would increase his combat power by several folds. Madman grabbed Wang Chuan. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the three of them immediately appeared above Seoul Ceiling Valley. This place is, smelling the pungent smell and looking at the terrifying scene below, Wang Chuan's face turned pale. I'll say it one last time. Do you want a hand over the ultimate meaning of the law of destruction? Madman asked. Wang Chuan swallowed his saliva and clenched his fists. Looking at the two of them, he sneered, You want me to submit in such a place? You guys are looking down on me too much. You have backbone. However, I hope you can really withstand it. Madman chuckled, grabbed Wang Chuan, and threw him into Seoul Ceiling Valley. Chapter 4065. However, even when Wang Chuan fell into Seoul Ceiling Valley, he didn't change his expression as he looked coldly at Qin Feiyang and Madman. He's really not afraid of anything. Madman frowned. What can we do about it? After all, it's the ultimate meaning. There are many people in this world who regard the ultimate meaning as more important than their lives. Let's not talk about him. Let's talk about us. If someone asks us to hand over the ultimate meaning, will we be willing? We definitely won't be willing. Qin Feiyang smiled bitterly. Then what should we do? Madman asked. I don't know either. Qin Feiyang shook his head. It was easy to deal with people who were afraid of death. But facing someone like Wang Chuan, who not only wasn't afraid of death, but also took the initiative to seek death, they were helpless. Madman pondered for a while. Suddenly, there was a sneer in his eyes as he stared at Wang Chuan. I want to see how tough you are. Wang Chuan revealed a mocking look. It was as if he was saying, Bring it on if you have any means. Madman looked at Qin Feiyang and laughed. Let's go to Bright Moon City. Bright Moon City? Wang Chuan was shocked. Why would they go to Bright Moon City? This was also the doubt in Qin Feiyang's heart. Isn't the Wang family in Bright Moon City? Why don't we go and wash the Wang family with blood now and exterminate them without leaving a single one? Madman's eyes were overflowing with blood. Qin Feiyang suddenly understood and nodded. I have the same idea. Wash the Wang family with blood. Wang Chuan's eyes trembled as he hurriedly shouted, Stop right there! And the two lowered their heads and looked at Wang Chuan suspiciously. Wang Chuan clenched his fists and closed his eyes in pain before finally nodding. All right, I will give you the ultimate meaning of the destruction law. Qin Feiyang and Madman looked at each other, revealing a trace of a smile in their eyes. He wasn't afraid of death, but he was very concerned about his family. This person wasn't too bad. They originally thought that after obtaining the ultimate meaning of the destruction law, they would directly kill this person. But now it was better to let him live so that he could go back and fulfill his filial piety. Very soon, Wang Chuan stripped away the ultimate meaning of the law of destruction. He looked up at Qin Feiyang and said, Promise me that you won't harm my family. If you had done this earlier, we wouldn't have come up with this plan. Madman chuckled. Wang Chuan glanced at the ultimate esoteric law of destruction, his face filled with reluctance. Then he gritted his teeth and waved his hand, sending the ultimate esoteric law of destruction flying toward Qin Feiyang. Qin Feiyang grabbed Wang Chuan and waved his hand, causing Wang Chuan to emerge from Seoul Ceiling Valley. Without the ultimate profound, what's the point of me living? Since I gave you the ultimate profound, please send my corpse to Haoyu City and hand it to my father. Tell him that your son is unfilial. Wang Chuan's eyes were empty. As soon as he finished speaking, he slammed his palm towards the top of his head. Qin Feiyang raised his eyebrows and stopped Wang Chuan, saying, Why are you doing this? In a person's life, other than status, power, and wealth, there are many other things that are worth cherishing. You snatched my ultimate profound, and now you're telling me these principles. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Wang Chuan sneered. But If you didn't follow us and have the intention to kill us, would I have the chance to snatch your ultimate profound? This is karma. Where there is a cause, there must be an effect, Qin Feiyang said indifferently. Where there is a cause, there must be an effect, Wang Chuan murmured. Suddenly, he closed his eyes, and the power of karma was gradually born. The hell? Epiphany? Madman looked at Wang Chuan in shock. He really didn't expect that this person could enter an epiphany state, and what he comprehended was the karma law. We seem to have underestimated him a little. Qin Feiyang was also very surprised. Madman nodded. Those who can enter an epiphany have limitless potential. Especially their luck, it far surpassed others. As time passed, the karma force emitted from Wang Chuan's body became stronger and stronger. About half an hour passed. Wang Chuan finally opened his eyes, looking at the karma law around him. He raised his head and looked at Qin Feiyang with an extremely complicated expression. It was clearly this person who snatched his ultimate profound from the destruction law. But now, because of this person, he comprehended the karma law. What an ill-fated relationship. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the three of them appeared in the void outside. You can leave now, Qin Feiyang said. Not killing me. Wang Chuan was stunned. Originally, I wanted to kill you, but your concern for your family and your talent made me have a whole new level of respect for you. However, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't be greedy for status and power. These things will only become shackles for people, making them sink deeper and deeper until they finally lose their way. At that time, not only will it bury your talent, but it will also make you fall into eternal damnation. So take care of yourself. Qin Feiyang reminded and led Madman into the black tortoise world, leaving Wang Chuan standing alone in the void in a daze. Black tortoise world. It seems that you really admire him. Madman laughed. He is a talent. Unfortunately, he is not one of our talents. Qin Feiyang shook his head. Then, aren't you afraid that he will take revenge on you in the future? Madman looked at him mockingly. If he really listened to my words, he wouldn't do that. Of course. Even if he comes for revenge, what's there to be afraid of? Qin Feiyang smiled faintly and walked toward the ancient castle. That's true. Killing him is just a matter of convenience. Madman nodded and quickly chased after him, asking, Are you planning to fuse with the ultimate profound from the destruction law? Qin Feiyang nodded. Then, 3 days later, are we still going to clear Sky City? Madman asked. Not going. I didn't plan to go in the first place. I just want to see if they will set up an ambush in advance after hearing the news. Qin Feiyang smiled. I see. Madman nodded and asked, Then, when do you plan to go to the southern continent? Seeing that Qin Feiyang was getting stronger and stronger, he also couldn't wait to go to the southern continent to kill the god race prodigies and unlock the seal on the box as soon as possible to obtain the inheritance and grasp the will of the heavens. Don't be in such a hurry. The plan has to be done step by step. Qin Feiyang chuckled and asked, You don't seem to have anything to do next. Why don't you go to Clear Sky City to take a look? Okay, as long as I can successfully kill the god race prodigies, I will listen to you. Madman bared his teeth. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. He gave Madman a coordinate and sent him out of the black tortoise realm. Then he entered the ancient castle to fuse with the ultimate profound from the destruction law. When Madman appeared outside, Wang Chuan was still there. What are you doing? Why aren't you leaving? Do you really want to die? Madman looked at him suspiciously. Wang Chuan came back to his senses and looked up at Madman. He shook his head and said, I don't want to die now. Why? Just because you comprehended the karma law. Madman was curious. No. Wang Chuan shook his head and took a deep breath. Because now I have found the right goal in life. I will return to the sovereign palace later and ask the great sovereign for my resignation. I will go. You have such high awareness? Madman was stunned. This was really unexpected. Wang Chuan pondered for a while and asked Madman, "Did Liao Yan really betray my sister?" "We don't need to lie to you about this. Although he and that dancer hid it well, there are many people in the city Lord Mansion. Someone must know, but they don't dare to say it. You can go back and investigate, won't you know?" Madman said lightly. "Thank you." Wang Chuan cupped his hands and thanked him. Then he opened a space-time tunnel. Suddenly he seemed to think of something and said to Madman, "The foundation of the divine kingdom is not something you can imagine. Be careful." Then, without waiting for Madman's reply, he turned and stepped into the space-time tunnel. Madman looked at Wang Chuan's back in shock. He was really enlightened by Qin Feiyang. His performance was completely different from before. He looked at the space-time tunnel again. He actually mastered the space-time laws. Not bad. He was indeed a talent. However, for them, whether it was Wang Chuan or Liao Yan, they were just passers-by in their lives. Perhaps they would never meet again. Then, he also opened a space-time tunnel and left. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. In these 3 days, the people of Qingtian City were in a state of panic. Because Qin Feiyang had already said that he would descend on Qingtian City in 3 days, not only had the spirit vein and crystal vein been transferred, even the people in the city had been evacuated. The sky gradually brightened and the sun rose. Outside the city, there was a sea of people gathered. There were humans and god race. There were also people of the purple gold divine dragon clan. They were all waiting. Inside the city, it was also dead silent. However, in a hall of the city, Lord's mansion, there were 3 people sitting. These 3 people were the monarch, the divine king, and the human race sovereign. There was no need to doubt. They were waiting for Qin Feiyang and Liao Yan here. They should be here soon. Through the window, the monarch looked at the rising sun and murmured. The divine king and the human race sovereign looked at each other and couldn't help but sigh. Just a few young people needed the 3 of them to come personally. Throughout the countless years of the divine kingdom, when had such a ridiculous thing happened? That's right. In their opinion, this was ridiculous. However, as time passed bit by bit, Qin Feiyang and Liao Yan still didn't appear. The 3 of them couldn't help but frown. The people outside the city also began to discuss. What's going on? It's already late in the morning and they still haven't appeared? Could it be that they are lying to us? That's impossible. With their courage, they will definitely do what they say. Let's wait a little longer. Although they said that they would come to our Qingtian city 3 days later, they didn't say the specific time. It could be in the afternoon or at night. Be patient. The others could wait patiently, but the monarch and the other 2 didn't have the patience. They had a bad premonition in their hearts. Don't you think that this is very strange? The divine king suddenly spoke. What's strange? The monarch was suspicious. When they were ransacking the first 50 cities, they didn't let us know about their actions at all. But when it came to Qingtian City, they directly said it in front of the 3 sovereigns. Is there no problem with this? The divine king frowned. The monarch and the human race sovereign were also surprised when they heard this. Chapter 4066. Suddenly, the divine king's eyes trembled as he said in surprise, "Could it be a diversion?" Luring the tiger away from the mountain, the king and the human race supreme being's eyes trembled. If it was really a diversion, what was the goal of Qin Feiyang and the others? Mount Supreme? The forbidden area of the god race? Or the forbidden area of the purple gold divine dragon race? Or to loot other cities? The human race supreme being waved his hand, and 10 venerables appeared. As expected, they were all hiding in the dark. The human race supreme being ordered, "Great Venerable, go back to Mount Supreme and see if there's any movement. The rest of you go to the major cities and see if there's any trace of Qin Feiyang and the others." Yes. The 10 venerables nodded and immediately turned to leave. The king and the divine king also called out a portion of the hidden experts and ordered them to immediately return to the south and north continent to check on the situation of the 2 continents. And soon, the people sent out came back with news. Everywhere was very quiet, and there was no trace of Qin Feiyang and the others. What are they trying to do? This made the king extremely annoyed, and he couldn't figure it out at all. Time passed. An entire day passed. Qin Feiyang and the others still didn't appear. The king and the other 2 were extremely helpless. They came to Qingtian City with so many people, but in the end, they didn't see anything. "These brats must be playing with us." The Mermaid Supreme being smiled bitterly, because other than that, there was no other explanation. "Do they think we're monkeys? How dare they?" The Divine King was very angry. Didn't they say that they were coming to Qingtian City? Come on then. What's the point of playing with them like this? Just you wait. Sooner or later, I'll let you know the price of angering me. Then, the Divine King got up, flipped his sleeves, and left. The king and the human race supreme being looked at each other, shook their heads, and smiled helplessly. They also got up and opened a space-time tunnel to leave. At this moment, it was already early in the morning. Not only did the people outside the city not leave, but more and more. What's going on? They didn't come out. The people who came later looked at the peaceful, clear sky city in astonishment. Not only did they not come, they didn't even see a shadow. They are toying with us. Toying with us? Brother, don't flatter yourself. We don't even have the qualifications to be toyed with by them. The people they want to toy with are the monarch and the others. Take a look. The monarch, the divine king, and the prime personally came to Qingtian City in order to capture them. However, in the end, they waited for an entire day and did not see anyone. You can imagine how bad the divine king and the others are feeling right now. The crowd discussed animatedly, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He actually dared to toy with the divine king, the monarch, and the sovereign. He was truly audacious. The most important thing was the divine king and the other 2 couldn't do anything about these people and could only sulk. In the blink of an eye, half a year passed. Qin Feiyang and the others did not appear again, nor did they plunder the city. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. However, the monarch, the divine king, and the supremes of the human race were getting more and more worried. This was too abnormal. It was not the character of Qin Feiyang and the others at all. There must be something wrong when things are abnormal. Could it be that these little brats were planning some shocking conspiracy? Just a casual sentence was enough to make these big shots live in fear and unable to eat or sleep. If Qin Feiyang knew about this, he would definitely be overjoyed. But one night, half a year later, Qingtian City, someone outside the city seemed to have seen Qin Feiyang and the madman. As soon as this news spread out, the people of Qingtian City became nervous again. However, some people said that they might have seen wrongly. But a few days later, a few people saw Qin Feiyang and the madman appear outside the city in the middle of the night. And this time, they saw it quite clearly. What? They appeared in Qingtian City again? Mount Supreme. The supremes of the human race looked at the great venerable below and frowned. Yes, someone saw it with their own eyes. However, they didn't make a move. They just flashed past each time. The great venerable nodded. What are they trying to do? The supremes of the human race slammed his palm on the armrest, looking incomparably annoyed. Couldn't they let him have a few days of peace? How about I make a trip to Qingtian City, personally? The great venerable asked. Okay, the supremes of the human race nodded. However, when the great venerable arrived at Qingtian City, Qin Feiyang and the madman never appeared again. Bastard, what are you trying to do? Can't you be more straightforward? That night, the great venerable's angry roar sounded outside the city, shocking everyone. Everyone smiled bitterly when they heard this roar. Qin Feiyang and the others really knew how to cause trouble. Even the great venerable was about to go crazy. Another few days passed. Mount Supreme. This was a majestic mountain range. Towering peaks towered into the sky. From afar, it looked like giant swords towering into the sky. Ancient palaces sat in the mountains, scattered like stars in the sky, looking majestic. The night was as dark as ink. 2 enforcers passed by in the sky. Suddenly, they stopped and looked at a mountain below. They couldn't help but feel their scalps tingle. There were 3 black figures on the mountain. They had no aura at all, like ghosts. "Who are you?" the 2 of them shouted. Hee, accompanied by a sinister laugh, a sword light appeared, illuminating the night. "It's you." The 2 of them finally saw the 3 black figures on the mountain. It was Qin Feiyang, the madman, and Li Feng. The sword light was emitted by the Time Divine Sword. The Time Divine Sword was the ultimate profound of the time law. Its sharp edge tore the sky and split the earth. And the person who attacked was Li Feng. He had already fused with the inheritance that Long Qin gave him, the ultimate profound of the time law. Of course, Qin Feiyang had also fused with the ultimate profound of the destruction law. With the appearance of the Time Divine Sword, the 2 enforcers' expressions changed, and they shouted, "Supremes, Qin Feiyang and the others have come to Mount Supreme." Their voices were like a bell, resounding through the night sky. What? The Supremes of the human race was sitting in a hall with his eyes closed. Hearing this, he immediately opened his eyes, and the anger in his eyes was clearly visible. "You didn't come when I invited you, but you came here secretly? Why are you so insensible?" Boom! A monstrous aura erupted. He took a step forward and disappeared from the hall. However, by the time he arrived at the scene, it was already a mess. The 2 enforcers were also lying on the ground in a sorry state. As for Qin Feiyang and the other 2, they had already disappeared without a trace. Supremes, they are simply too much. They actually came to Mount Supreme to cause trouble. This is a blatant provocation to us. The 2 enforcers struggled to get up and ran to the Supremes of the human race. Their faces were also filled with anger. The Supremes of the human race took a deep breath and looked at the 2 of them, asking, "Are you all right?" "My life is not in danger for now. But it will be hard to guarantee the next time." Thinking of the previous scene, their scalps couldn't help but tingle. Whoosh! At this moment, the 10 Supremes also came through the air. Behind them, there was a dense crowd of people. They all came to support after hearing the news. But when they came here and saw the empty mountains and rivers, their expressions were immediately stunned. "Where are they?" the great Supremes asked. "They have already left." The Supremes of the human race sighed. "What's going on with them?" "They came to take a look and then immediately fled." When they were alone, they shouldn't be so afraid of Mount Supreme. The great Supremes frowned. It was really puzzling. "That's right. With our strength, we can flatten Mount Supreme." Suddenly, an ethereal voice sounded. It was the madman's voice, but it was erratic and couldn't be determined. Everyone present was shocked. "They still haven't left?" The great Supreme said angrily. "What exactly do you want to do?" "What do we want to do? Isn't it obvious? We want to destroy your Mount Supreme. However, if we destroy it all at once, it will be really boring. So we plan to destroy you step by step, making you all live in fear and have a mental breakdown." The madman laughed. The group of people's eyes darkened. "Why are you doing this?" The Supremes of the human race said. "Then why did you invade the Sky Cloud realm? We're just giving them a taste of their own medicine. Just you wait. Next, your Mount Supreme will be very lively." "Ha ha!" The madman's rampant laughter echoed in the sky for a long time. The Supremes of the human race had been looking for the location of Qin Feiyang and the other two, until the last moment he finally locked onto their location. Schwa! In an instant, he landed on top of a giant mountain not far away and looked down at the mountain peak below. There was no one on the mountain peak, but there was a space-time tunnel that was dissipating, and he could still sense the aura left behind by Qin Feiyang and the other two. They really are three little foxes. The supremes of the human race whispered, "Whoosh!" The great supremes and the others also rushed over, looking at the dissipating space-time tunnel. Their faces darkened. "Sir, these people will definitely do what they say. What should we do now?" A law enforcer asked nervously. "Yeah. We can't let them continue to mess around like this. Otherwise, our Mount Supreme will lose all face." The second Supremes nodded. "Losing face is a small matter. If we really let them continue like this, not only the people below, but even us old fellows will collapse sooner or later. Their method of revenge is a bit ruthless." The great Supremes sighed. Destroying Mount Supreme step by step was like torturing them. The Supremes of the human race pondered for a while, then looked at the great Supremes and said, "Immediately inform the monarch and the divine king to bring reinforcements. This time, no matter what, we must get rid of these threats." His words were filled with killing intent. At the same time, the South Continent, there were also countless cities of various sizes on this land. Most of the people living in these cities were from the human race. After all, no matter where it was, the human race's huge population would far surpass the other races. However, unlike the West Continent, the cities of the South Continent were all controlled by the God race. All kinds of resources were also controlled by the God race. If humans wanted to live in the South Continent, they had to abide by the rules of the God race. As for the God race, they also had a huge population. According to what Qin Feiyang learned from reading the memories of the city, Lord of Haoyu City, the population of the God race was at least a few billion. They were known as the second most populous race in the Divine Kingdom. Chapter 4067. However, there was a place that even ordinary Protoss were not qualified to enter, let alone humans. That place was the mythical island. The mythical island was located in the center of the South Continent. It was a huge island floating in the sky. It was the land of the Protoss. The Protoss living on the mythical island were basically the direct descendants of the Protoss. For example, Jiang Yunshuang, Jiang Qin, and Jiang Xing lived on the mythical island. That's right. The Protoss also had a difference between direct descendants and collateral descendants. The treatment enjoyed by the direct descendants was countless times better than that enjoyed by the collateral descendants. The direct descendants were born with supreme status, while the collateral descendants had to rely on themselves. They had to comprehend at least one ultimate law to have a chance to enter the mythical island. The mythical island was the same as Mount Supreme. It was a holy land in the eyes of the Protoss. Entering the mythical island was equivalent to ascending to heaven. Below the island, there was a stretch of mountains and rivers that stretched endlessly. The mountains were majestic and ferocious beasts were everywhere. On one of the mountain peaks, 3 figures stood side by side. It wasn't Qin Feiyang and the other two. It was Long Qin, White-Eyed Wolf, and Long Qin. The White-Eyed Wolf and the other two also concealed their aura and hid in the darkness like ghosts. Their eyes were locked on the mythical island in the sky. Actually, when Qin Feiyang and the madman appeared outside Qingtian City, White-Eyed Wolf and the other two had already secretly sneaked into the South Continent. This was Qin Feiyang's plan. They split into 2 groups and did things separately. Qin Feiyang, the madman, and Li Feng deliberately created chaos in the West Continent to attract everyone's attention. White-Eyed Wolf, Long Chen, and Long Qin quietly entered the South Continent to investigate the situation of the Protoss. In other words, White-Eyed Wolf and the other two had been in the Divine Land for more than 10 days. In these 10 days, they had been investigating the Protoss and were almost done. Whoosh! Suddenly, a space-time tunnel appeared beside them. White-Eyed Wolf and the other two turned around and saw 3 figures walking out. They were Qin Feiyang and the other two. This is the land of the god race. Looking at the deity island in the sky, the madman and Li Feng were stunned. Yes, according to our observations, there's a protective barrier around this island. The one who set it up seems to be a high-grade sovereign divine weapon. Long Qin nodded. A high-grade dominator weapon? Madman was shocked. That's right. It's not just the purple-gold divine dragon clan. The god race also has a high-grade sovereign weapon. Overseeing this place all year round, Long Chen's tone was grave. Hearing this, Li Feng turned his head to look at Qin Feiyang and asked, "Then could Mount Supreme also have a high-grade ruler weapon?" "I don't know. However, in the memories of the city lord of Haoyue City, there is a piece of information. It is said that the human sovereign has a very powerful sovereign weapon. As for what level of sovereign divine weapon it is, the city lord doesn't know." Qin Feiyang shook his head. "If that's the case, then it's definitely a high-grade ruler weapon. After all, the god race and the purple-gold divine dragon clan both have a high-grade ruler weapon." Li Feng's gaze was heavy. "Maybe." Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Feng stared blankly at Qin Feiyang and asked in confusion, "Why do you look so relaxed?" Qin Feiyang paused and asked suspiciously, "Should I be very worried?" "Shouldn't you be? These are 3 high-grade ruler weapons." Li Feng said in shock. "I know, but it's just 3 high-grade ruler weapons. Is there a need to be so serious?" Qin Feiyang didn't understand. Li Feng was shocked. The madman, White-Eyed Wolf, Long Qin, and Long Qin all looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. "Is there a problem?" Qin Feiyang was very confused. He didn't seem to have said anything wrong. "Sigh." Long Qin shook his head and sighed. He patted Li Feng's shoulder and comforted. "It's not Qin Dage's fault. For someone like him who has 3,000 incarnations, high-grade ruler weapons aren't worth mentioning." Li Feng paused and shook his head with a bitter smile. The madman, White-Eyed Wolf, and Long Qin looked at Qin Feiyang with helpless expressions. "What do you mean? Can't we talk properly?" Qin Feiyang said angrily. Long Qin rolled his eyes and said angrily, "You have 3,000 incarnations, so of course you don't care about high-grade ruler weapons. But we're different." Qin Feiyang paused and suddenly slapped his head. He looked at the 5 and smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, I didn't react in time." "You're asking for a beating." White-Eyed Wolf glared at him. Qin Feiyang laughed dryly. Indeed, with 3,000 incarnations, not to mention 2 or 3 high-grade ruler weapons, he wouldn't be afraid even if there were 8 or 10. This was because 3,000 incarnations could greatly increase his strength. However, the madman and the others were different. Although their methods were heaven-defying, none of them had 3,000 incarnations. For example, White-Eyed Wolf. Even if he grasped 6 ultimate laws and merged them with the will of the heavens, he could at most fight against a mid-grade ruler weapon. He had no chance of winning against a high-grade ruler weapon. This was because a high-grade ruler weapon's lethality was comparable to 100 low-grade ruler weapons combined. As for their battle souls, they were even more useless against a high-grade ruler weapon. Do you understand now? Tell me, weren't you angry just now? The madman rolled his eyes at him. Sorry. Qin Feiyang kept apologizing. Up until now, no matter if it was a low-grade ruler weapon, mid-grade ruler weapon, or high-grade ruler weapon, he had always relied on his 3,000 incarnations to crush them. This caused him to overlook the threat these ruler weapons posed to the madman and the others. They weren't a threat to him, but to the madman and the others, there was a fatal danger. I hope that the soul vein and crystal vein we stole this time will allow the ruler weapons of the Black Tortoise world to quickly evolve. The white-eyed wolf's eyes were filled with desire. If each of them had a high-grade ruler weapon, in addition to their own strength, then even if the divine kingdom came to surround them, they could still easily crush them. Don't have too much hope. Long Chin shook his head. What do you mean? The white-eyed wolf was suspicious. Think about it, the divine kingdom is so powerful and has so much origin energy, but they can only create a few high-grade ruler weapons. And the gap between the black tortoise world and the divine kingdom is obvious. Not to mention high-grade ruler weapons, they probably don't even have the ability to create mid-grade ruler weapons. Long Chin said indifferently, I think so too. The divine kingdom only has a few high-grade ruler weapons, so you can imagine how difficult it is for a mid-grade ruler weapon to evolve into a high-grade ruler weapon. The madman shook his head and sighed. There's no rush. Take it slow. I'm here anyway. Moreover, the black tortoise world has fused with the time array, so its growth speed is much faster than the divine kingdom. Sooner or later, the black tortoise world will catch up to the divine kingdom. Qin Feiyong smiled. Let's hope so. The madman nodded. I'm looking forward to the castle's evolution now. The castle and the black tortoise world have fused into one. Wherever the black tortoise world grows, the castle will also grow. As long as it evolves into a mid-grade ruler weapon, it means that the black tortoise world has the ability to create one. Qin Feiyong smiled. Long Chin was stunned and asked, From what you're saying, the castle doesn't need to absorb origin energy like other ruler weapons to evolve. No need. Strictly speaking, it doesn't even need to cultivate on its own. Qin Feiyong said. That's really comfortable. Long Chen was stunned. Moreover, it doesn't seem to need to undergo a tribulation, because when the castle evolved into a low-grade ruler weapon, it didn't go through a tribulation. Qin Feiyong smiled. This should be the benefit of fusing with the black tortoise world. The castle is really lucky. Long Chin sighed. No. The castle and the black tortoise world complement each other. Without the castle's time array, the black tortoise world wouldn't have been able to grow so fast. Moreover, when the black tortoise world hadn't grown yet, the castle was even stronger than the black tortoise world. At that time, they still had to rely on the castle's protection. Qin Feiyong shook his head. This is called the sweet after the bitter. The castle was also investing in it back then. Long Chin joked. When Qin Feiyong and the others heard this, they couldn't help but laugh. Qin Feiyong collected his thoughts and looked at the white-eyed wolf and the others. Tell me what you've gathered these days. It's nothing more than that. Jiang Yunshuang, Jiang Chen, Jiang Xing, and that man and woman are all on the mythical island. We've also investigated the situation of that man and woman. They were originally from a branch family of the god race and weren't qualified to enter the mythical island. But later, they activated their strongest war souls and were highly regarded. The Divine King ordered people to bring them to the mythical island and focus on nurturing them. They didn't disappoint the Divine King's expectations. Now, the two of them are even stronger than Jiang Qin and Jiang Xing. They have both mastered to ultimate profundities of the strongest laws. Moreover, they comprehended them on their own. Long Qin said, What's the big deal? If we're given time, we can also comprehend them on our own. Li Feng said disdainfully, That's for sure. In terms of age, they're old enough to be our ancestors. However, their talent is indeed not bad. Long Qin smiled. Then what are their names? And what are their war souls? Qin Feiyong asked. The man is called Jiang Xing. The woman is called Jiang Zishan. Jiang Xing's war soul is the evil eye, while Jiang Zishan's war soul is the all-seeing eye. Long Qin explained. Aren't they the archenemies of Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang? The madman raised his eyebrows. What's wrong? Long Qin looked at him in confusion. To be honest, I want to find Dong Jingyang's Eye of Destiny first. The madman snorted coldly. You have a problem with Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang? Long Qin asked with a smile. Aren't you asking the obvious? The madman glared at him. I've already said it. It's all in the past. Don't mention it again. If you really don't like them, then just let them follow me. I'll welcome them. Long Qin laughed. You're quite good at dreaming. The madman's face was full of disdain. No matter what, he couldn't let this guy get away with it. However, if Brother Wolf could get along with Long Qin, it would be a different story. Chapter 4068. Long Qin couldn't help but laugh. He looked up at the floating island and pondered for a while, then asked, How are the arrangements on your side? It's all arranged. Crazy nodded. Long Qin smiled and said, In that case, now we just need to wait for the Divine King to lead his people to Mount Supreme. The reason why Qin Feiyang, Li Feng, and Madman went to Mount Supreme to cause trouble was actually to divert attention, because they had already announced that they would destroy Mount Supreme step by step. The human race's sovereign would definitely not sit still and wait for death. With Mount Supreme's foundation, it would be a bit difficult to deal with Qin Feiyang and the others. So, they needed the help of the Divine King and the King. Also, if they wanted to successfully encircle Qin Feiyang and the others, just the Divine King and the King weren't enough. They had to bring the old antiques of their race. As long as the Divine King left with the old antiques of the God race, wouldn't Jiang Xing, Jiang Zishan, and Jiang Yinchuan be theirs? I think the human sovereign is already contacting the Divine King and the King. Li Feng snickered. If this plan of luring the tiger away from the mountain succeeded, not only would Jiang Yinchuan and the others be able to get a lot of divine items from the God race. For example, crystal veins and soul veins. Although Qin Feiyang and the others had looted 51 cities in the West Continent and got a lot of soul veins and crystal veins, who would complain about having more of these things? Especially in the Xuanwu world, the more the better. Long Qin smiled and said, Brother Qin, last time you purposely went to rob Qingtian City. It wasn't just to test if the king and the others would come to encircle us, right? Yeah. Qin Feiyang nodded. What do you mean? White-eyed Wolf looked at the two curiously. It's simple. To confuse them so that they can't guess what we want to do. It's also to lay the foundation for this plan. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. Laying the foundation, the white-eyed wolf frowned. Why was it that the more he listened, the more confused he became? You can't even figure this out. Yet you keep saying that you're smart. Don't you feel ashamed? Long Qin looked at the white-eyed wolf with disdain. You know? Come. I'm all ears. Tell me. The white-eyed wolf snorted. Fine. Last time, Qin Feiyang said that he was going to rob Qingtian City, but in the end we didn't go. Faced with such a situation, the monarch and the others will definitely think that we are luring the tiger away from the mountain and have other plans. This point has also been confirmed. At that time, the monarch, the human paragon, and the divine king have all sent their people back to their clans to check on the situation. I'm guessing they're still wondering what we're trying to do. There's a good saying. No matter how shrewd a person is, once he loses his mind, he'll be like a headless fly, losing his judgment. This is also Qin Feiyang's purpose, to confuse them. Long Qin said, That's right. Actually, to put it simply, last time in Qingtian City, they thought that we were luring the tiger away from the mountain, but nothing happened in the end. But this time, we're really luring the tiger away from the mountain, so they won't suspect anything. Qin Feiyang said with a faint smile. So that's how it is. Psychological warfare. The white-eyed wolf nodded in realization. So, the plan has to be carried out step by step. Facing the divine king, the monarch, and the human paragon, we have to be 120% alert. Otherwise, one wrong step and we'll lose the whole game. Qin Feiyang smiled. Yes, when facing these people, The taboo is to be impatient. Long Chen nodded. The night was as dark as ink. In the sky, the mythical island was also extremely quiet. Qin Feiyang and the other 5 stood in the mountains, watching the mythical island like 6 ghosts. Wait, even if the Divine King and the others leave, they'll definitely open the space-time tunnel and go to Mount Supreme. We can't see them if we hide here. Even if they've left, we won't know. Li Feng frowned. There's no need to worry about that. Once the God King leaves, there will naturally be someone who will inform us of this. Long Chen waved his hand and smiled. Leak information? Qin Feiyang, the mad scientist, and Li Feng were stunned. We didn't waste any time in the South Continent in the past 10 days. The white-eyed wolf bared his teeth. If you have something to say, then say it. The mad scientist glared at him. Why are you keeping us in suspense? A few days ago, we met a young man from the god race in a nearby city. His name is Jiang Yuquan, a direct descendant of the god race, and he has another identity. He's Jiang Yunshuang's cousin. The white-eyed wolf chuckled. Jiang Yunshuang's cousin? Qin Feiyang and the mad scientist were startled. That's right. He's a famous foppish son of the god race. We happened to bump into him, so we took control of him. The white-eyed wolf said. So that's how it is. Qin Feiyang smiled. If there's a spy, then things will be much easier. However, Li Feng was a little hesitant and asked, Is he reliable? Even if he was controlled, he could still betray them. After all, the god race was very powerful. Ordinary secret arts of control shouldn't be a problem for them. Moreover, even if it was a blood oath, the king would have a way to break it. Don't worry. Jiang Yuquan is controlled by Little Qin himself. Little Qin is very confident. Except for the ruler of the Divine Kingdom, no one can break this secret art of his. The white-eyed wolf bared his teeth. What secret art? Qin Feiyang and the other 2 looked at Long Chen curiously. Soul control art. Direct control of the divine soul. It's similar to your seal of slavery. It can peek into the opponent's mind and erase the opponent's divine soul from a distance. Long Chen smiled. Soul control art, Qin Feiyang murmured. As the son of the ice dragon, Long Chen's secret art of control was certainly not simple. It might even be stronger than the seal of slavery. As long as Long Chen said that no one could break it, then no one could. As for the ruler of the Divine Kingdom, even if he wanted to help, he didn't have the energy to do so. About half an hour later, suddenly a black figure flew out from the Divine Island and went straight down. It was a young man in black clothes. He was about 25 or 26 years old. He was 8 meters tall and had an extraordinary temperament. Looking at the young man, Long Chen, Long Qin, and the white-eyed wolf smiled. Asterisk swoosh. Asterisk when the young man landed in front of Long Chen. He immediately knelt on the ground and bowed. Greetings, master! Qin Feiyang looked at the young man suspiciously. Although this person looked energetic and didn't show any signs of being controlled, he always felt that something was wrong, like a puppet. But it didn't seem like it. That was because puppets usually had empty and lifeless eyes. But this person was very energetic. Long Chen nodded and smiled. Get up! Jiang Yuquan got up and stood respectfully in front of Long Chen. Has the Divine King left? Long Chen asked. He has already gone to Mount Supreme, and he took with him more than 1,000 elders, including the 9 sovereigns. Jiang Yuquan said, truthfully. 9 sovereigns. Li Feng was stunned. The god race is the same as the human race. They also have 10 sovereigns. Each sovereign controls the will of the heavenly Tao. Long Chen explained with a smile. Amazing. Li Feng was speechless. If they were in the sky cloud realm, which one of them wouldn't be a lord? White-eyed wolf looked at Jiang Yuquan and asked, If the 9 sovereigns are taken away, Does that mean there is still one sovereign left? Yes. The one left behind is the 10 sovereigns. The divine king asked him to guard the island. Jiang Yukuan nodded. Qin Feiyang asked, then besides the 10 sovereigns, are there any other powerhouses on the island who have mastered the will of the heavenly Tao? No. Jiang Yukuan shook his head. Qin Feiyang nodded and asked again, then do you know where Jiang Yunchuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan live? Yes. Jiang Yukuan nodded. Very good. Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed coldly. This time, he would catch all 3 of them in one fell swoop. Long Chen glanced at Qin Feiyang and said to Jiang Yukuan, send us to your spatial divine item and then take us to the island. Yes. Jiang Yukuan nodded respectfully. With a wave of his hand, Qin Feiyang and the other 5 immediately appeared in an unfamiliar stone room. The stone room was about a few hundred feet long. Although it was a spatial divine item, the decoration was extremely luxurious. Pearls, agates, and emeralds were inlaid on the floor. The tables, chairs, and furniture were all made of 10,000-year-old mahogany. Sit anywhere. Long Chen smiled, as if he was the owner of this spatial divine item. He was not unfamiliar with it at all. He entertained Qin Feiyang and the others. Qin Feiyang laughed involuntarily. Outside, Jiang Yukuan rose into the air and returned to the island. Qin Feiyang and the other 5 sat around the table. Long Chen made tea and said to Jiang Yukuan outside, let's see the situation outside. As soon as he finished speaking, a picture immediately appeared in the void next to him. The picture showed the situation of the island. At the edge of the island, there stood a magnificent gate, which was hundreds of feet high and exuded an ancient aura. There were 2 bold words engraved on it. Divine Clan. This was the entrance to the island. The entire island was shrouded in a barrier. The only way to enter the island was through this gate. Don't underestimate this gate. This gate was made of Heaven's Eye stone, which had the ability to distinguish between real and fake. If you changed your appearance and sneaked into the Divine Clan, your original appearance would immediately be revealed. Of course, if you were strong enough, you wouldn't have to think so much. You could just break the barrier and kill your way in. Qin Feiyang and the others had this strength. However, although they had the ability to break the barrier, they couldn't act rashly and alert the enemy at present. After all, once there was a commotion, the Divine King would immediately receive the news. At that time, he would come back with the monarch and the human clan's supreme master, as well as a large number of experts to support them. Then it would not be them who would capture Jiang Yunchuang and the others, but the monarch and the others who would encircle and annihilate them. Therefore, they had to capture Jiang Yunchuang and the others first before they could truly let loose. At the gate, there was a white-robed old man in charge. He had white hair and a white beard with a celestial demeanor. His aura was as unfathomable as the ocean. This person was the 10 venerables of the Divine Clan. Great-grandfather. Jiang Yukuan bowed respectfully. The 10 venerables opened their eyes and looked stunned. They raised their old arms and waved. A light curtain immediately appeared on the stone gate, and then it slowly cracked open. Jiang Yukuan walked in. Didn't you just go out? Why are you back? A trace of affection appeared on the 10 venerables' old faces, and from the way Jiang Yukuan addressed the 10 venerables, it was not difficult to tell that the 2 had a close relationship. I forgot to bring something. Facing the 10 venerables, Jiang Yukuan's face was also full of respect. You're so young and you're already forgetful. What will happen in the future? There's more. Don't wander around outside all day. Learn from your sister Jiang Yunchuang and work hard on your cultivation. The 10 venerables reprimanded gently. Okay, Jiang Yukuan nodded. Then go. The 10 venerables waved their hands. I'll take my leave. Jiang Yukuan bowed and saluted. Then he rose into the air and flew forward. Chapter 4069. Great-Grandfather. Inside the spatial divine object, Qin Feiyang was drinking tea while looking at Jiang Yuquan in the image with a trace of suspicion in his eyes. Yes, Jiang Yuquan is the great-grandson of the 10th Venerable. It is precisely because of this relationship that Jiang Yuquan has the right to be arrogant and domineering. Long Qin smiled. Then, isn't this 10th Venerable also Jiang Yunshuang's great-grandfather? Qin Feiyang asked. Of course. They are cousins, so naturally they are of the same lineage. Long Qin nodded. This is interesting. You control Jiang Yuquan. I want to snatch Jiang Yunshuang's war soul. At that time, I'm afraid this 10th Venerable will not rest until we are dead. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Are you afraid? Long Qin looked at him playfully. Afraid? Qin Feiyang smiled. He was afraid that he would not come. He looked at Jiang Yuquan in the image again and looked at Long Qin meaningfully. Your soul control technique is a bit beyond my imagination. It's okay. Soul control technique is equivalent to the combination of slavery seal and puppet technique, but it can't read the other party's memory. Long Qin smiled. Qin Feiyang's pupils shrank. No wonder this person looked like a puppet. It will be a bit troublesome to find them one by one. Why don't we ask Jiang Yuquan to call Jiang Yunshuang and the other two over and get rid of them together? Madman asked. That's for sure. By the way, we can also take some spirit veins and crystal veins away. Qin Feiyang smiled. Madman heard this and asked, Then why don't we go to the god race's treasure vault again? Qin Feiyang and Li Feng looked at each other, and their eyes suddenly lit up. The god race's treasure vault must have a lot of inheritances of ultimate profound. If they could catch all of them in one net, wouldn't they be rich? Don't think about it. I've already asked around. Even Jiang Yuquan doesn't know where the Protoss treasure vault is. White-Eyed Wolf shook his head regretfully. No way. Jiang Yuquan is a direct descendant. Madman was stunned. In the entire god race, only the Divine King knows the location of the treasury. Even the 10 Venerables don't know. There are even rumors that the Divine King carries the treasury with him. The White-Eyed Wolf shook his head. So cautious? Madman and Li Feng looked at each other. It's reasonable. After all, this is the god race's treasury. The Divine King will definitely be extra careful. Qin Feiyang smiled. Actually, I have the feeling that the Divine King, the autarch of the human race, didn't have that many ultimate legacies. Most likely, they were all in the hands of the Sovereign Lord. Long Qin guessed after thinking for a while. That makes sense. Otherwise, the Divine Kingdom wouldn't only have so few people with the will of the heavens. Long Qin nodded. If the 3 Venerables really had a large number of ultimate legacies, then they could let Jiang Yunshuang and the other youngsters fuse with them. This way, when they fought against them in the Sky Cloud realm, they could completely crush them. But all this time, people like Ryuko and Jiang Yunshuang hadn't grasped the will of the heavens. This meant that the ultimate legacies were most likely in the hands of the Divine Kingdom's sovereign. If the monarch and the others wanted the legacies, they would have to ask the Divine Kingdom's sovereign. Outside, in front of the entrance of the Divine Island, was a magnificent city. This city was called Divine City. It covered an area of hundreds of thousands of miles. The grand halls were dazzling, and the wide streets were bustling. There were millions of Protoss in this city alone. One had to know. Those who could live in Divine City were all direct descendants of the Protoss. If there were so many direct descendants of the Protoss, one could imagine how many collateral descendants there were. Behind the city was a stretch of undulating mountains. Giant peaks towered into the sky, shrouded in clouds. It was like a fairyland. This stretch of mountains was a forbidden area in the eyes of the Protoss' direct descendants. It had a famous name, Divine Mountain. This was because most people could only live in the Divine City. Those who were qualified to enter the Divine Mountain were only true descendants like Jiang Yuquan. There was a big difference between the collateral descendants and the direct descendants, and there were some differences between the direct descendants and the direct descendants. The direct descendants were the ones with real power and influence. The Divine King, the 10 Venerables, and the old antiques of the Protoss all lived in this Divine Mountain. Jiang Yuquan's residence was also here. Finally, Jiang Yuquan crossed the Divine City and entered Divine Mountain. The place was lush with vegetation and auspicious beasts. The rich spiritual essence was more than 10 times that of the Divine City outside. Judging from the rich spiritual essence, there were at least 1 million spirit veins and crystal veins buried under the Divine Mountain. To the Black Tortoise world, this was a huge treasure trove. On the Divine Mountain, there were no large and magnificent buildings. There were only ancient pavilions scattered between the mountains and the peaks. It seemed incomparably quiet, like a paradise. Several hundred breaths passed. Under Long Chen's order, Jiang Yuquan arrived above a lake. The lake at night was quiet and still. Beside the lake, there was a courtyard. Flowers bloomed all around, attracting bees and butterflies. The main hall of the pavilion, all kinds of exquisite jade artifacts, were dazzling. Jiang Yuquan entered the main hall and closed the door. Qin Feiyang and the rest appeared, but they concealed their presence. Long Chen's gaze swept over the main hall. Then he looked at Jiang Yuquan with a smile. Go call Jiang Yunshuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan here in your name. Yes, Jiang Yuquan responded, then turned around and left in quick steps. He was really obedient. Li Feng looked at Jiang Yuquan's back and asked curiously, is he a puppet now, or does he have his own consciousness? In my eyes, he is a puppet, but in the eyes of others, he is no different from an ordinary person. Long Chin smiled faintly. Soul control technique, so powerful? Madman rubbed his chin and stared at Long Chin, his eyes flickering with uncertainty. One must know, whether it was the slave seal, puppet technique, or blood soul technique, none of them could achieve this. For example, puppet technique. Before becoming a puppet, it was indeed no different from an ordinary person. But after becoming a puppet, it was like a walking corpse without the slightest emotion. And this soul control technique, not only could it turn the other party into a puppet, but it could also retain one's own consciousness. This was obviously more advanced than other control techniques. I have to be careful. I don't want to be controlled by this guy if I'm not careful. Wait, Jiang Yunshuang and the others are now on the Divine Island. Did they leave their divine souls behind? Don't let Jiang Yuquan bring them here and leave their divine souls behind in advance, making us work for nothing. Li Feng suddenly asked, Are you stupid? If it were you, would you leave your divine souls behind to save your life when you return to your own home? When the white-eyed wolf heard this, he immediately rolled his eyes. Li Feng was stunned and looked quite embarrassed. It was indeed a very stupid question. He smiled and said, Then Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan can also be considered as the Divine Kingdom's prodigies. Hearing this question, the white-eyed wolf and madman immediately looked at Long Qin, because this was related to the seals of those inheritances. Jiang Yunshuang was a public prodigy of the Divine Kingdom. As long as she was killed, the seal of one box could be unlocked. And if Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan were also considered as the Divine Kingdom's prodigies, then the seal of 2 more boxes could be unlocked. The white-eyed wolf was only 2 ultimate prodigies away from mastering the will of the heavenly Tao, so he was very concerned about this question. And now the decision was in Long Qin's hands. If Long Qin said that Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan were not considered as the Divine Kingdom's prodigies, and that it was useless to kill them. Then he could only watch helplessly. Long Qin looked at the white-eyed wolf playfully and said, "You're sucking up to me." The white-eyed wolf's face suddenly darkened. This damned woman. She was deliberately making things difficult for him. Logically speaking. Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan both had the strongest fighting soul and had comprehended two ultimate prodigies of the heavenly Tao. No matter what, they could be considered as the divine kingdom's prodigies. Long Qin, don't you care about your sister? Madman's face was a little ugly. Ahem. Long Qin coughed dryly and said with a smile, "Qin has the final say in this matter." When Madman heard this, the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. He said fiercely through voice transmission, "Brother Wolf, show your masculinity as a man and conquer this damned woman." Conquer her? Brother, you have nothing better to do. The white-eyed wolf secretly snorted coldly. Brother, whether we can unlock the seal in the future depends on her mood. You can't be willful. Even if she asks you to give yourself to her, you have to nod and agree. Madman said, "Get lost. This kind of spoiled woman, whoever wants her can have her. I'm not interested." The white-eyed wolf expressed his disdain. For the sake of everyone's future, just bear with it. Don't worry. Fire Dance will definitely support you too. Madman instigated. The white-eyed wolf's mouth twitched as he glared fiercely at Madman. Wasn't this asking him to sell his body? Although he was indeed very handsome. But at this moment, Madman and the white-eyed wolf's eyelids twitched as they felt a chill enveloping them. They quickly looked at Long Qin and saw Long Qin's frosty face. Immediately, their faces were full of flattering smiles, because they found that Long Qin's eyes were shining faintly. They were too familiar with it. This was a sign that Long Qin had activated his fighting soul. Obviously, Long Qin had already activated his fighting so long ago and heard their conversation. What's wrong? Qin Feiyang, Long Qin, and Li Feng looked at them in confusion. Sister Long, this is all little Madman's fault. Don't blame me. I'm very pure, and I also admire you very much. You're not spoiled at all. You're understanding. You're educated and reasonable. You're simply the goddess in our men's hearts. The white-eyed wolf laughed dryly at Long Qin. Shut up. Who's your sister, Long? Long Qin angrily rebuked, but his cheeks were faintly red. There was no need to explain any more. Qin Feiyang, Long Qin, and Li Feng also understood. The white-eyed wolf and Madman must be secretly discussing something. They had angered Long Qin. They had caused the trouble themselves, so they had to solve it themselves. Thus, they didn't interrupt. Humph. I originally wanted to fulfill your wish, but now, even if you kill Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan, it doesn't count. At most, it only counts as Jiang Yinchuang's place. Long Qin coldly glared at the two of them. Don't. The white-eyed wolf panicked. Madman also panicked and repeatedly apologized. There was no other way. The decision was in the other party's hands. They had to give in. Long Qin proudly turned his head. The white-eyed wolf quickly got up and ran to Long Qin's side, pouring tea and apologizing. Don't be noisy, they're coming. But suddenly, Qin Feiyang looked up at the door. The door was tightly shut, and he could clearly sense for auras rushing over here. It was Jiang Yuquan, Jiang Yinchuang, and two unfamiliar auras. Chapter 4070. Get ready. Long Chen's eyes flashed. He got up and walked behind the door, restraining his aura to the extreme. Qin Feiyang and the others looked at each other and got up one after another. They walked to both sides of the door like ghosts, waiting for Jiang Yinchuang and the others to push the door open and take them down in one fell swoop. Outside, Jiang Yuquan flew in front. Jiang Yinchuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan followed behind him. The three of them looked at Jiang Yukuin's back with a trace of suspicion on their faces. Soon, the four of them landed in the courtyard. "Brother Kuin, what are you trying to do?" Jiang Xing scanned the courtyard and looked at Jiang Yukuin with a cheeky smile. Although he was stronger than Jiang Yukuin, he looked at Jiang Yukuin with a trace of flattery. The reason was simple. Jiang Yukuin was the descendant of the 10 Venerables. He was the real direct descendant. Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan were collateral descendants. It was because of their fighting souls that they broke the rules and went to the Divine Island to cultivate. In terms of status, they were lower than Jiang Yukuin, a playboy. Of course, collateral descendants like Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan actually looked down on Jiang Yukuin in their hearts, because people like Jiang Yukuin were not worth mentioning at all. But there was no other way. He was born with an unparalleled identity and status. "Don't worry, you'll know later." Jiang Yukuin smiled mysteriously. "You'd better not waste my time." Jiang Yinchuang was not happy. She had always been disgusted with this cousin of hers. Except for bullying others and idling around, he had no other advantages. But after all, he was a relative. Sometimes she still had to give him face. "I won't." Jiang Yukuin waved his hand. There seemed to be a trace of fear towards Jiang Yinchuang. "You're all here." But just as Jiang Yukuin was about to open the door, a burst of laughter sounded. "Father, second uncle, uncle." The four of them turned their heads and hurriedly bowed to salute. It was a middle-aged man wearing a white robe. He was about 1.8 meters tall, with a little white hair at the temples, exuding a vicissitude aura. His name was Jiang Qianwu, Jiang Yukuin's father. As Jiang Yukuin's father, his status in the god race was needless to say. He was also considered the backbone of the god race. "Why is he here?" Long Qin frowned. "What is it? Is this person very strong?" "Qin Feiyang, madman." Li Feng was suspicious. "His name is Jiang Qianwu. He's the brother of Jiang Yunchuang's father. As for his strength, he's not bad. However, it's relatively easy for us to take him down. It's just that there might be a huge commotion later." Long Qin secretly transmitted his voice. "Doesn't matter. In any case, when we capture Jiang Yunchuang and the others later, it will still cause a big commotion." Hearing this, Li Feng immediately waved his hand. As long as it wasn't someone like the Divine King, there was nothing to worry about. Outside, Jiang Qianwu looked at Jiang Yukuin's group of four and said with a smile, "How come you have time to gather together?" Jiang Xing changed his playful attitude and replied respectfully, "Brother Kuin asked us to come here. He said that he has something to discuss." Hearing this, Jiang Qianwu was surprised. "It's not a big deal." Jiang Yukuin waved his hand, looked at Jiang Qianwu suspiciously and asked, "Are you here to look for me? Is there anyone else living here besides you?" Jiang Qianwu rolled his eyes, took out an iron box, threw it to Jiang Yukuin and sighed, "There's an inheritance inside. Take it and integrate it." There was a look of disappointment in his eyes. "Inheritance?" Jiang Yukuin was taken aback and quickly caught the iron box. Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan also immediately stared at the iron box. Their eyes were burning with a trace of jealousy. This was the treatment of a direct descendant. For a branch descendant like them, no matter how hard they worked or how outstanding they were, it was impossible for them to obtain the inheritance of an ultimate, profound meaning. What law inheritance is it? Jiang Yunchuang was curious. The law of darkness. Jiang Qianwu smiled. The law of darkness? He had heard of it before. Jiang Yukuin immediately became disinterested and said, "Why don't you give me the inheritance of an ultimate law?" Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan looked at each other. "Look, what kind of nonsense is this? You picked up an inheritance for free, and you actually dislike it? If you dislike it, then give it to us." "We don't dislike it. You really don't know how lucky you are." Jiang Yunchuang's face suddenly darkened when she heard this, and she said angrily, "Do you think the inheritance of the ultimate profound meaning of an ultimate law is radish or cabbage that can be found everywhere on the street? Didn't you get the inheritance of an ultimate law back then? If you can get it, why can't I?" Jiang Yukuan muttered. Jiang Yunchuang was furious. He actually wanted to compete with her. Seeing that Jiang Yunchuang was a little angry, Jiang Qianwu couldn't help but frown and stare at Jiang Yukuan, saying, "Don't be ungrateful. Just this inheritance. I humbled myself and asked for it from the great venerables. If you can be more successful, like your cousin, would I be so humble?" Jiang Yukuan shrunk his neck and quickly lowered his head. "Useless thing, you always embarrass me. Learn more from your cousin, Jiang Xing and Zishan." Jiang Qianwu snorted coldly and turned to leave with a belly full of anger. "Second uncle, take care." Jiang Yunchuang saluted and then looked at Jiang Yukuan, saying angrily, "You're asking for a scolding." "Ha!" Jiang Yukuan smiled and turned to open the door. After the door was opened, an empty hall was revealed. Jiang Yukuan's eyes flashed with a touch of suspicion. Where are they? But when he walked into the hall and saw Qin Feiyang and the others standing on both sides of the door, a cold light flashed in his eyes. Jiang Yunchuang and the other two outside the door didn't notice Qin Feiyang and the others at all. They also didn't expect that Qin Feiyang and the others could enter the island without being noticed. There was no doubt. Jiang Yunchuang followed into the hall. At this moment, murderous intent flashed in Jiang Yukuan's eyes. He suddenly turned around and slapped Jiang Yunchuang's lower abdomen. How could she have expected this? She was completely caught off guard. Puff! A mouthful of blood spurted out, and her chi shattered on the spot. "What are you doing?" Jiang Yunchuang roared. Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan, who hadn't entered the hall, also stared at Jiang Yukuan in shock and anger. Whoosh! The next moment, Qin Feiyang and the others jumped out like lightning. "Who is it?" Before Jiang Yunchuang and the others could see clearly, Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan also screamed at the same time. Their chi shattered on the spot and blood gushed out. Qin Feiyang, Long Chen, Lunatic, Li Feng, Golden-Winged Wolf King, Long Qin. Finally, they also saw Qin Feiyang and the others, and their faces suddenly changed. What was going on? Why were these people here? Wait, it's Jiang Yukuan. The three of them quickly turned around and fled like a bolt from the blue. "Where do you think you're going?" "Lunatic, white-eyed wolf." Li Feng laughed and went forward like lightning. He grabbed the necks of the three people and twisted them in his hands like chickens. "Jiang Yukuan, you actually colluded with them." Jiang Yunchuang roared. Jiang Yukuan stood respectfully beside Long Chen and said proudly, "It's a great honor to be able to serve Master." "Master?" Jiang Yunchuang was shocked and couldn't help but look at Long Chen. It turned out that he was controlled by Long Chen. "Qin Feiyang, Long Chen, how dare you sneak into the holy land of our God clan?" At this time, an angry roar sounded and resounded in all directions. It was Jiang Qianwu who had returned. He didn't go far before, so after hearing the noise, he immediately came back to check, but he didn't expect to see this scene. This made him shocked and angry. "What? Qin Feiyang, Long Chen, they're on our God's island." Jiang Qianwu's roar startled everyone on the God's island. Impossible! The 10 venerables who were guarding the entrance suddenly stood up, their faces full of disbelief. They opened a space-time tunnel and rushed in like lightning. He had been guarding the entrance and didn't see Qin Feiyang and the others enter the God's island, so he didn't want to believe it. However, when he landed in the sky above the God's mountain and saw Qin Feiyang and the others below, his face suddenly changed and he roared, "Qin Feiyang is attacking! Quickly inform the Divine King!" It's really Qin Feiyang and the others. How did they get in? Quickly send a message to the Divine King. The entire God's Island instantly fell into chaos. In front of the lake, Qin Feiyang looked at Jiang Qianwu and the 10 venerables and said in a deep voice, Li Feng, go to the Black Tortoise world and keep an eye on the 3 of them. Okay, Li Feng nodded. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and Li Feng and Jiang Yinshuang immediately disappeared. Shuang the 10 venerables roared. All the ultimate mysteries were activated in an instant. The will of the heavenly Tao rolled out, emitting a destructive aura. If you're not afraid of destroying the God's Island, you can attack us. Qin Feiyang sneered at his master, and the 3,000 incarnations were activated. He looked at Long Qin, the frenzied one, and the white-eyed wolf, and said, Quickly help! Now, Qin Feiyang and the others were fearless, because they were in the God race's territory. They weren't afraid of a fierce battle, but the God race was different. They had too many things to worry about. Just like when the Divine Kingdom invaded the Sky Cloud world, the people of the Sky Cloud world had to worry about many things. As Qin Feiyang's voice fell, the 3,000 incarnations, Long Chen's group, and Qin Feiyang's group of 4 all took action. The power of various laws emerged, and like a huge wave, it surged towards the mountains and rivers below. Boom! At this moment, not only the sacred mountain, but the God City outside also erupted with a terrifying aura. These were the powerhouses of the God race. Countless of them. One after another, they rushed over here with murderous intent. The 10 venerables in the sky wanted to take action, but Qin Feiyang's words made them hesitate. This was the God race's headquarters. If they really fought here, the God's Island would inevitably collapse. It didn't matter if the God's Island collapsed, because it could be rebuilt. But the people living here would probably all die once the battle started. It didn't matter if it was a branch descendant. But the problem now was that the people here were the direct descendants of the God race. If all of them died, it would undoubtedly be a disaster for the God race. It's really them. What are they doing? Are they robbing us of our crystal veins and spirit veins? Stop them. Bastard, they're going too far. A group of old antiques rushed over, roaring. If you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. The 3,000 incarnations sneered. The karma law, destruction law, death law, and life and death law's ultimate profundities were instantly activated. The will of the heavenly Tao erupted. Retreat. Seeing this scene, the 10 venerables' eyes trembled, and they hurriedly shouted. The top powerhouses of the God race were basically brought to Mount Supreme by the Divine King. With the current powerhouses of the God race, it was impossible to block the 3,000 ultimate profundities of the life and death law. Not to mention, there were also 3,000 ultimate profundities of the karma law, destruction law, and death law. This was enough to destroy the entire God's Island, including all the direct descendants and direct descendants. Chapter 4071. In fact, the 10 supremacies didn't even need to remind them. When the 3,000 incarnations activated their ultimate intents, the God race antiques had already sensed a fatal threat and ran away. Not to mention them, even the Divine King wouldn't be able to stop Qin Feiyang's 3,000 incarnations. After all, this was someone who had defeated the king. Boom! Crack! At the same time, the divine mountain below continued to collapse. Numerous spirit veins and crystal veins quickly appeared. These were all top-grade spirit veins and crystal veins. There were a total of 7 to 800,000 of them. And this wasn't all the spirit veins and crystal veins on the divine mountain. The situation was urgent, and Qin Feiyang and the others didn't have time to snatch all the spirit veins and crystal veins here. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and hundreds of thousands of spirit veins and crystal veins instantly disappeared without a trace. Then Qin Feiyang shouted, "Let's go!" Boom! The 5 supremacies and 3,000 incarnations immediately rushed into the sky with their ultimate intents. The 10 supremacies in the sky saw this scene and quickly retreated. They had to retreat. The 3,000 ultimate intents of the law of life and death were like fully awakened sovereign divine weapons, making one's scalp tingle. Boom! The 3,000 incarnations attacked, and the 1,000 ultimate intents of the law of life and death turned into a torrent that blasted into the sky. With a loud bang, an enchantment appeared and was instantly shattered. This was a barrier that the Divine King had personally set up. But in front of the 1,000 ultimate intents of the law of life and death, it was as vulnerable as a dead tree. Qin Feiyang and the others rushed out of the divine island. Swish! At this moment, space-time tunnels appeared. Wisps of terrifying auras burst out from the ground. Among them were the auras of the Divine King, the human race's supremacy, Heavenly Lord Ji, the human race's grand supremacies, and others. They're really fast. But before we leave, we still have to give them a greeting gift. Otherwise, we'll be very impolite. Frenzy chuckled. That's what I'm thinking. Qin Feiyang lifted the corner of his mouth. Boom! After activating the ultimate intent of the 3,000 incarnations, there were still 2,000 ultimate intents of the law of life and death, 3,000 ultimate intents of the law of karma, 3,000 ultimate intents of the law of death, and 3,000 ultimate intents of the law of destruction. At this moment, all the people on the mythical island had fallen into the abyss of despair. It was the same for the 10 venerables, 11,000 ultimate profundities of ultimate laws, and 2,000 of them were ultimate profundities of the law of life and death. Who could block such a killer move? Whoosh! Finally, the Divine King and the others appeared. When they saw this scene, their expressions changed drastically. Boom! Without hesitation. With the monarch and the other 2 taking the lead, they attacked one after another. Millions of God clan members of the God Island were also running away, crazily. The barrier had been shattered by Qin Feiyang and the others. For them, it was equivalent to creating a glimmer of hope, because if the barrier was not shattered, they could only pass through the only entrance. But now, with the barrier broken, they could also escape from the island in all directions like Qin Feiyang and the others. Rumble. It was accompanied by an earth-shattering sound. Even if the monarch and the others joined forces to block the 11,000 ultimate profundities, the terrifying shockwaves directly tore the mythical island apart. Although millions of God clan members had escaped from the mythical island in time, they were still affected by the shockwaves. More than half of them were killed or injured. For the God clan, it was a great loss. I have another gift. I hope that seniors will kindly accept it. Long Chen's voice came from afar. Not long after his voice fell, a figure broke through the sky like lightning. It was Jiang Yuquan. The monarch and the others were surprised. Jiang Yuquan flew straight to the sky above the mythical island, and his physical body exploded on the spot. Jiang Qianwu roared, gritting his teeth. The Divine King's face also sank. A sovereign's aura emerged from his body and instantly erased the shockwaves caused by Jiang Yuquan's self-destruction. Obviously, this was the superior grade, sovereign divine weapon of the God clan. In order to deal with Qin Feiyang and the others, the Divine King had brought it to Mount Supreme. However, even if this superior grade, sovereign divine weapon was on the mythical island before, it wouldn't be of much use, because the superior grade, sovereign divine weapon couldn't block the ultimate intents of the 3,000 incarnations. Qin Feiyang, Long Chen, Jiang Qianwu, swear that I won't rest until I'm dead. Jiang Qianwu's face was filled with grief. The members of the God clan surrounded the void in the distance. Looking at the shattered mythical island, they were also incomparably pained. The divine king, the 10 sovereigns of the God clan, and a group of old antiques stared in the direction that Qin Feiyang and the others had escaped. They also clenched their hands tightly, their eyes gloomy to the extreme. They never thought that Qin Feiyang and the others' target would be their sacred land. Ah, we were too careless. This time, it's really luring the tiger away from the mountain. The human race sovereign sighed. The divine king retracted his gaze and shouted, 10 sovereigns, get over here! The 10 sovereigns walked in front of the divine king, trembling in fear. What's going on? The divine king stared coldly at the 10 sovereigns. The 10 sovereigns' eyes trembled. Speak, the divine king shouted. It's Jiang Yuquan. He brought Qin Feiyang and the others to sneak into the mythical island. The 10 sovereigns hurriedly said. Jiang Yuquan. The divine king's gaze turned and fell on Jiang Qianwu. Jiang Qianwu's body couldn't help but tremble. He hurriedly said, Lord Divine King, please calm down. From the previous situation, Yuquan was also controlled by Longqin. He had no choice. Because of him, the God clan suffered such a great calamity. Now, you want to clear your name by saying that he had no choice? The divine king was enraged. Lord, please forgive me. Jiang Qianwu hurriedly knelt in the void. And they kidnapped Jiang Yunchuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan. The 10 sovereigns said in pain. What? Hearing this, the divine king's face suddenly turned pale. The monarch, the human race's supreme, and the others were also shocked. Whether it was Jiang Yunchuang, Jiang Xing, or Jiang Zishan, they were all geniuses of the God clan. It could be said that whether they could defeat people like Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor in the future depended on them, because they all had the strongest fighting soul. But they didn't expect that they would all be kidnapped by Qin Feiyang and the others. Did they leave their divine souls in advance? The human race's supreme asked. No, the 10 sovereigns shook their heads. Wasn't this asking the obvious? They had already returned to the God clan's sacred ground. Why would they split their divine souls? Splitting the divine soul had advantages and disadvantages. The advantages were that it could save one's life. The disadvantages were that one couldn't enter the state of enlightenment, and it would also affect one's comprehension of the laws. Therefore, generally speaking, they would only split their divine souls when they were fighting to save their lives. It seems that their target is Jiang Yunchuang and the others. In other words, they are here for the strongest fighting soul. The situation is getting worse. The monarch frowned. That's right. Since they came to kidnap Jiang Yunchuang and the others, it means that the owners of the other half of the Eye of Life, the Eye of Evil, and the Eye of Heaven are with them. The human race's supreme nodded. Hearing this, the hearts of everyone present couldn't help but sink. Qin Feiyang's Eye of Heaven and the demon ancestors' Eye of Despair had already displayed a heaven-defying power. Once the Eye of Life, the Eye of Evil, and the Eye of Heaven evolved, then Qin Feiyang's side would have the 5 strongest fighting souls. The 5 strongest fighting souls. It was hard to imagine what kind of disaster the divine kingdom would face by then. This is the trouble caused by Jiang Yuquan. Jiang Qianwu, apologize with your death. The divine king shouted angrily. Lord, please spare my life. Monarch, Lord Supreme, please help me plead for mercy. Jiang Qianwu was terrified. The monarch and the human race's supreme looked at each other and didn't say anything. If it was a small matter, they could help to intercede. But the current situation was no longer a small matter. It was even related to the survival of the divine kingdom. They had never expected that they would lose to Jiang Yuquan. Sigh. Lord, Jiang Yuquan is at fault, but he has already self-destructed and died. As for Jiang Qianwu, he is innocent. He doesn't deserve to die. Moreover, with Qin Feiyang's methods, Even if they can't find Jiang Yuquan, they will control the other people. We can only blame ourselves for being too careless and being played around by them. The god race's supreme side. They were completely led by Qin Feiyang and the others by the nose. It is because of your indulgence that such a playboy can be raised. The divine king glared at the supreme and shouted, "Give me the order immediately. From now on, the direct descendants and direct descendants are not allowed to leave the divine island without permission. Those who violate this will be killed first and reported later." Yes, all the supreme nodded. In addition, spread the word that as long as they are willing to return Jiang Yunshuang and the other two intact, the god race is willing to give them the inheritance of 3 ultimate laws as compensation. No matter what, we must save the 3 of them. The divine king said in a deep voice. Yes, all the supreme nodded and immediately turned to leave. The supreme being of the human race glanced at the divine king, then looked at the monarch and said, "It seems that we have to focus on protecting Ji Shaoi, Lu Zhongtian, and Zhuang Mingyue in the future. We can't let them fall into the hands of Qin Feiyang and the others." Yes. The monarch nodded and pondered for a while. He frowned slightly and said, "But then again, Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan have never fought in the Sky Cloud realm. Even in the Divine Kingdom, not many people know about their fighting souls. So, how did Qin Feiyang and the others know about their fighting souls?" Yes. How did they know? Could it be a coincidence? Actually, they didn't come here for the strongest fighting souls. The supreme being of the human race was slightly stunned and quickly asked, "There are so many sky prides in the divine kingdom, but they didn't look for anyone else but Jiang Yunshuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan. Isn't that obvious enough? As for how they know, you have to ask them themselves to find out. In short, don't underestimate them anymore." It was because they underestimated these people again and again that the divine kingdom was in such a passive situation now. They had learned their lesson. If they didn't learn their lesson, they would be digging their own graves. Sigh. The monarch sighed and looked at the divine king. He asked, "Do you have enough supreme law inheritance?" "Not enough." The divine king shook his head. "Then we can't ask the monarch for it now. How about this? If Qin Feiyang and the others really agree to hand them over, you can inform me at that time. I still have 1 supreme law inheritance with me." The monarch said, "I also have 1 inheritance left in my hands. However, don't get your hopes up. After fighting with Qin Feiyang and the others for so long, I have some understanding of them. Without special circumstances, they won't easily release a tiger back to the mountain. Even if they are released, I'm afraid they won't be able to keep the fighting souls." The supreme being of the human race shook his head. "I know." The divine king nodded, his eyes full of murderous intent. 3 sky prides were captured, 700,000 to 800,000 spirit veins and crystal veins were lost, and the divine island was destroyed. More than half of the direct descendants and clansmen were killed or injured. Such losses had shaken the foundation of the divine kingdom. Such a blood feud must be repaid with their lives. Chapter 4072. At the same time, West Continent, near Qingtian City, a space-time passage appeared, and 4 men and 1 woman walked out one after another. It was Qin Feiyang's group of 5. At this moment the world was still dark. The surrounding mountains and rivers were extremely quiet. Madman glanced around and laughed. "It went smoother than I thought." "What a joke! Who was the one who planned this? How could there be an accident?" The white-eyed wolf smiled proudly. Madman was stunned. He looked at the white-eyed wolf strangely and asked, "What does this plan have to do with you?" "It seems to be old Qin's plan." "What do you mean by that?" "So I didn't contribute at all. Besides, if we hadn't cooperated with him and entered the South Continent in advance to control Jiang Yuquan, the plan wouldn't have gone so smoothly." The white-eyed wolf was dissatisfied. Okay. No matter whose contribution it is, as long as our plan is completed successfully. Qin Feiyang chuckled. No matter how perfect the plan was, it would be difficult to implement it alone. This was the power of unity. Everyone had contributed to the battle. Madman glanced at the white-eyed wolf with disdain and frowned. He has been captured, but I feel that, speaking of this, Madman rubbed his forehead with a rather irritated look. Do you feel uncomfortable that we're still helping Mu Qing look for his nemesis and let him reap the benefits of others' hard work despite how he treated us? Qin Feiyang asked with a smile. It's more than uncomfortable. My heart is simply suffocating. Madman snorted coldly. As for what contribution Mu Qing had made to the Sky Cloud realm, he could still figure it out. But since entering the Sky Cloud realm, whether it was facing the three major races or the Divine Kingdom, Mu Qing hadn't contributed much. This was simply reaping without sowing. The most important thing was, this person's thoughts weren't simple. This made people feel that helping him wasn't worth it. Take it easy. No one is perfect. Furthermore, he has already made a blood oath. Not to mention that it's too far away, at least before we destroy the Divine Kingdom. He won't betray us again. Qin Feiyang patted Madman's shoulder and smiled comfortingly. Long Qin looked at Madman and Qin Feiyang. He pondered for a while and said with a smile, Actually, Mu Qing's current state of mind is envy and jealousy. Envious? Jealous? Long Qin looked at Long Qin suspiciously. That's right. You've never been to Great Qin, so you don't understand the past between Qin Feiyang and Mu Qing. Actually, the two of them have known each other for a long time. At that time, Mu Qing was better than Qin Feiyang in terms of background, support, cultivation, and resources, because the Mu family at that time was very powerful. On the other hand, Qin Feiyang was kicked out of the imperial capital. Therefore, such a gap made Mu Qing maintain a sense of superiority. He felt that he wasn't inferior to Qin Feiyang and even stronger than Qin Feiyang in the future. But he never expected that the Mu family would be destroyed by Qin Feiyang in the end. At that time, his heart must have fallen. Later, he entered the ancient world, and then the Sky Cloud realm. Qin Feiyang's strength became stronger and stronger, and his status became higher and higher. Even people like Madman, White-Eyed Wolf, and Li Feng became people standing at the top of the Sky Cloud realm. But what about Mu Qing? Not only is the gap between him and Qin Feiyang getting bigger and bigger, but he even has to live under the protection of Qin Feiyang. Naturally, he can't accept it. Although I don't have much contact with Mu Qing, I can see that he is a proud and arrogant person, so he can't accept it. He wants to become stronger than Qin Feiyang and the others. This also leads to his current approach becoming a bit radical. Long Qin smiled. So it's like that. Long Qin nodded in realization. As expected of Long Qin, you see it very clearly. Qin Feiyang gave a thumbs up and asked, Then in your opinion, how can we completely resolve the conflict between us? If it was before, he wouldn't care so much. If they couldn't be friends, then they could be enemies. But now, as more and more things happened, his mentality gradually changed. For example, the grudges with the demon ancestor and Mu Tianyang. It would be best if they could be resolved. In short, it was better to avoid trouble. Long Chun waved his hand and smiled. In fact, it's very easy to solve this problem. Have a good talk with him and open your hearts to each other. After all, we have been together for so many years. It would be a lie to say that we have no feelings for each other. When Qin Feiyang heard this, he pondered for a while and nodded with a smile. That's true. Even the grudges between you and me can be resolved. What's the grudge between me and Mu Qing? Can this be generalized? This is because we are magnanimous and don't want to argue with you. Long Qin snorted coldly. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded with a smile on his face. Thinking back to the past, Long Qin's resentment towards them could be described as absolutely irreconcilable. But now, wasn't Long Qin of the same mind as everyone? No matter how unreasonable Mu Qin was, it couldn't be more difficult to deal with than Long Qin. Let's not talk about this anymore. Let's hurry up and reap our rewards, Lunatic urged, somewhat impatient. Hearing this, everyone's face was full of smiles. The Black Tortoise Realm, above the Blood Sea in the western region. The sea of blood that stretched as far as the eye could see was swept up by the howling wind, causing huge waves to rise to the sky. Because of the Blood Sea, the sky of the western region was also shrouded in blood clouds all year round. Standing above the blood sea was like being in purgatory. It was so harsh. Jiang Yunshuang, Jiang Xing, and Jiang Zishan were suppressed above the Blood Sea and were terrified. Because there were no living creatures here, the blood waves rolled and the smell of blood enveloped the world, innately giving people a sense of fear. Li Feng stood aside and looked at the three of them coldly, but he was extremely worried. He was worried about Qin Feiyang and the others. Whoosh! Suddenly, Qin Feiyang and the others appeared. Li Feng's eyes lit up, and he hurriedly went up to them and asked, "Qin Dage, how is it outside?" Because he was in the Black Tortoise Realm. He didn't know what happened later. "We have left the southern continent." Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. "That's good." Li Feng breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that something would happen to Qin Feiyang and the others outside. Jiang Yunshuang looked at Qin Feiyang and the others, and her face suddenly sank, and she roared, "What do you want to do?" "What do we want to do? Do you still need to ask?" White-Eyed Wolf's face was full of sarcasm. This time, you didn't leave your divine soul to save your life. Madman's face was also full of ridicule. Jiang Yunshuang panicked. In the Sky Cloud Realm, the reason why she dared to be fearless was because she left her divine soul to save her life every time in the God Race's sacred land. But now, without her divine soul to save her life, once Qin Feiyang and the others ruthlessly attacked, even a god wouldn't be able to save her. Are you afraid? Do you still dare to be as arrogant as you were in the Sky Cloud Realm? Long Qin also had a face of ridicule. Back in the Sky Cloud Realm, she didn't like this woman. She didn't have any ability, yet she was so arrogant. If it wasn't for her divine soul in the divine kingdom, who knows how many times she would have died. Looking at the expressions of Madman and the others, Jiang Yunshuang trembled, knowing that this time it would be difficult to end well. White-Eyed Wolf stepped forward, reached out and lifted Jiang Yunshuang's chin, and laughed. "Kneel down and beg for mercy, then we can consider letting you go." "Don't even think about it," Jiang Yunshuang roared. "Ha!" White-Eyed Wolf laughed. Everything was within his expectations. If this woman really knelt down and begged for mercy, he wouldn't be used to it. Suddenly, he rolled his eyes and turned to look at Long Qin, and said with a smile, "Little Qin, this woman is also a person of status. Then I'll let you wrong her and let her be your concubine." Long Qin's mouth twitched. "What is this?" Long Qin also stared at White-Eyed Wolf angrily and said, "Why don't you keep her for yourself? You're so stupid. How could this woman be her brother's woman? I don't have such good fortune. Moreover, I'm doing this for your brother's good. Look at your brother, he's not young anymore, but he's still single. Aren't you worried?" White-Eyed Wolf bared his teeth. "Get lost." Long Qin's face darkened. All right. If you don't like it, then I'll reluctantly stay." White-Eyed Wolf waved his hand helplessly and looked at Jiang Yunshuang and said, "You can be my personal maid from now on. Although you're the divine lady of the divine race, my status is not bad, so it's not a waste of talent." Hearing this, not to mention Long Qin, even Qin Feiyang and the others couldn't help but roll their eyes. "What status can you have? Don't flatter yourself, okay? How shameless." As for Jiang Yunshuang, he was so angry that he almost vomited blood. Meanwhile, Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan were trembling beside him. Although they had long heard of Qin Feiyang and the others' names, This was the first time they had met them face to face. It was not difficult to see that white-eyed wolf and the others' attitude toward Jiang Yunshuang, that they were a group of lawless people. If they fell into the hands of these people, they would definitely not have a good ending. Long Qin took a deep breath, looked at Qin Feiyang and said, "Hurry up and call Mu Tianyang, Mu Qing, and your wife here." "Okay." Qin Feiyang nodded. With a thought, Mu Qing, Mu Tianyang, and the mermaid princess immediately appeared beside him. The mermaid princess and the others were a little suspicious at first, but when they felt the hostility, they immediately understood and immediately looked at Jiang Yunshuang and the others. As for Jiang Yunshuang and the others, when they heard the conversation between Long Qin and Qin Feiyang, they were also a little confused at first. However, just as the mermaid princess and the other two arrived, they felt the hostility from the three of them, and they instantly understood. Jiang Yunshuang originally thought that Qin Feiyang and the others sneaked into the island and kidnapped her to take revenge for the personal grudge in the Tianyan realm. Now she understood. This had nothing to do with personal grudges. They were here for the strongest fighting soul. But the question was, how did these people know about their fighting souls? Her Eye of Life could be explained because she had opened it when they fought in the Tianyan realm. But Jiang Xing and Jiang Zishan's fighting souls had never been opened in the Tianyan realm. Mu Tianyang looked at Jiang Xing for a while, then looked at Qin Feiyang and the others and said with a smile, "Thank you for your hard work. As long as you don't bite the hand that feeds you." Madman snorted coldly. This sentence made Mu Tianyang extremely embarrassed. But the most embarrassed one was Mu Qing, because he had already done something that repaid kindness with ingratitude. Moreover, he also knew that Madman's words weren't said for Mu Tianyang, but specifically for him to hear. Qin Feiyang glanced at Mu Qing, then looked at Mu Tianyang and the mermaid princess, and said with a smile, "You guys start first." Then he looked at Mu Qing and said, "I want to talk to you." After that, he turned and walked away. Chapter 4073. Mu Qing's eyelids twitched. Why did he ask him to have a private chat at this time? Did he want to threaten him with the all-seeing eye? Go. Don't think so much. Qin Feiyang is not such a person. Mu Tianyang patted him on the shoulder and smiled encouragingly. Mu Qing was his descendant, and he had watched him grow up, so he could tell what Mu Qing was thinking at a glance. Okay. Mu Qing summoned up his courage and turned to walk toward Qin Feiyang. "You can't do this. We are the prodigies of the god race, and we have the divine king's protection." Jiang Yunshuang and the other two were already panicking to the extreme. "Haha, still so naive? We are not even afraid of the divine king himself, so why would we be afraid of her protection?" White-eyed Wolf laughed. It seemed that these so-called prodigies of the divine kingdom were nothing more than this. Thinking back, how arrogant was Jiang Yunshuang in the sky cloud realm. But now, what was the difference between him and an ordinary person? On the other side, Qin Feiyang stopped. Seeing this, Mu Qing hurriedly stopped and stood in the void behind him with his head lowered. Extremely nervous, Qin Feiyang slowly turned around, looked at Mu Qing and sighed. "I really don't know when we have become so distant." Huh. Mu Qing looked up at Qin Feiyang. What did this mean? Qin Feiyang took a deep breath and bowed. "I sincerely apologize for suppressing you in the soul-sealing valley last time. I hope you can understand." This, Mu Qing was completely dumbfounded. Apologize to him? What did this person want to do? "We have known each other since the Forgotten Continent. After so many years, I still remember the scenes of the past. To be honest, I am indeed very angry about the last time you schemed against Dong Xingyang. After all, Dong Xingyang saved you. Think about it, if you were Dong Xingyang and someone schemed against you like this, what would you do? I'm afraid you would turn hostile on the spot." Qin Feiyang sighed. Mu Qing was silent. If it was really him, it would definitely be a fight to the death, and there would be no discussion with anyone who came. Back then, when we were in Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent, we were friends and fought side by side, but we were also enemies and plotted against each other. But that's all in the past. This journey has not been easy for either you or me. Why are we still harping on the past? Look at Long Chen and Long Qin. Even they were able to let go, so why can't you? Could it be that you are inferior to them? Qin Feiyang said. These words were obviously meant to provoke him. Mu Qing was indignant when she heard that. I know. You are upset because you see me and the white-eyed wolf getting stronger and stronger, but you have to know that we have sacrificed much more than you over the years. Don't misunderstand. I am not showing off in front of you. I am just stating a fact. Actually, you don't have to feel so much pressure. Look at the demon ancestor. Wasn't he also at odds with me? But now look at how I treated him. Whether it's you or the people around me, I don't have any selfish motives. When I become stronger, I will not forget you. There's a good saying, it is better to squash enmity than keep it alive. Now we might as well open our hearts and say what is in our hearts directly to put an end to it completely. After all, it is uncomfortable to hide it in the heart, right? Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Mu Qing looked at Qin Feiyang, pondered for a while, and asked, back then, Qin Yuan hid it from you and resurrected us. Were you very angry? This matter, I don't deny it. At that time I was indeed very angry. However, after all these years I have already let it go. After all, we have experienced too much. Thinking back to the past, we were all blank pieces of paper, but now we are all filled with vicissitudes. Qin Feiyang deeply sighed. The experiences of this life made him feel very tired, so there were many things that he did not want to pursue. Firstly, he did not have the energy. Secondly, he did not want to live in the past. Hearing this, Mu Qing looked up at the sky and nodded as she sighed. That's right, we're no longer who we were in the past. Before, we were all high-spirited youths, but now, in Great Qin and the Forgotten Continent, we've most likely become old antiques. Be more confident. Don't say probably. Qin Feiyang wanted to be confident. Time passed so quickly. Thinking back to the past, it was as if it had just happened yesterday. Mu Qing bitterly laughed and let out a long breath. Looking at Qin Feiyang, she said, I accept your apology, and I also sincerely apologize to you. It was all because of my jealousy that I did these stupid things. To tell you the truth, when I was in Soul Sealing Valley, I was thinking, why did I become like this? Although I, Mu Qing, am not a good person, I still have conscience. Returning kindness with enmity. Isn't that what I have always hated the most? You really hit the nail on the head just now. It's jealousy. Jealousy is really a scary thing. Once a person is jealous, they will lose their rationality and become unscrupulous. Mu Qing shook her head and sighed, her face full of regret. Is that so? I thought that you came out of Soul Sealing Valley because you hated us, so you didn't come to the Devil's Land. Qin Feiyang shook his head. What right do I have to hate you? I don't have the face to face you. Especially Dong Zhenyang. Compared to his open-mindedness and generosity, I am like a villain. I really want to find a hole to hide in. Mu Qing sighed. Don't think so much. Dong Zhenyang won't take it to heart. Qin Feiyang waved his hand and smiled. Sure enough, only by opening their hearts to each other could they know each other's true thoughts. Whether he takes it to heart or not, I owe him an apology. I will deal with this matter myself. You don't have to worry. However, the grudge between the line of the Qin and the line of the Mu is the biggest problem. Back then, your ancestor Qin Batian and my ancestor Mu Tianyang were right and wrong. We juniors can't judge whether they were right or wrong. Only when they let go of the past grudges can our two clans be considered to be truly reconciled. Mu Qing said, We don't have to worry about these things. My ancestor and Mu Tianyang will deal with it themselves. We just don't want to cause trouble for them. Qin Feiyang stretched out his hand and said with a smile, "Since we have made things clear, let's have a little ceremony. Shake hands, let go of the past, and face the future together." Mu Qing couldn't help but laugh. She raised her hand and the two of them shook hands. This also meant that the enmity between them had been completely buried. "By the way, thank you for helping me find my old enemy," Mu Qing said with a smile. "We are all partners who have gone through life and death together. It's only right for us to help each other. And this time, if there are no accidents, you, Mu Tianyang, and Dong Jingyang will all receive the inheritance of the ultimate profound of the supreme law." Qin Feiyang's eyes flashed. "Really?" Mu Qing's eyes lit up. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and said with a faint smile, "Jiang Yunshuang and the other two have all mastered the ultimate profound of the supreme law, and their talents are not bad. The Divine King will not watch them die." "You mean the Divine King will use the ultimate profound of the supreme law to exchange for them?" Mu Qing was bewildered. Besides the inheritance of the ultimate profound of the supreme law, what else can tempt us? Moreover, Jiang Yunshuang and the other two have mastered the ultimate profound of the supreme law. Qin Feiyang chuckled. Mu Qing pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "Not only do you want to get the inheritance of the ultimate profound of the supreme law from the Divine King, but you also want to deprive Jiang Yunshuang and the other two of their ultimate profound of the supreme law. You are really ruthless. Why be polite to the god race? However, it won't be easy to get Jiang Yunshuang and the other two to willingly strip away their ultimate profound of the supreme law." Qin Feiyang shook his head. Wang Chuan was the best example. If it weren't for the threat of his family's lives, he would rather die than strip away the ultimate profound of the supreme law of destruction. "It's okay. You have to believe in the white-eyed wolf's methods." Mu Qing smiled sinisterly. "That's true." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. The white-eyed wolf's methods of torturing people were still quite good. He said, "Oh, after the all-seeing eye evolves, it will be more advantageous for us. Because then we will be able to know the whereabouts of the Divine King and the others at any time." "Okay." Mu Qing nodded and turned to leave quickly. Whoosh! Watching Mu Qing leave quickly, Qin Feiyang heaved a sigh of relief. Whether it was Long Chen and his sister, Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang, they had always been a huge burden to him. As the children of the ice dragon, it was harder to kill Long Chen and his sister. If he didn't kill them, it would be a hidden danger and pressure. Mu Qing, Mu Tianyang, and the demon ancestor could be easily eliminated. But Dong Jingyang's attitude of protecting them was also very firm. Moreover, this was also Yuan Bo's intention, because it was Yuan Bo who protected the three of them. At the same time, Mu Qing and the others who had the strongest fighting soul. Once they were allowed to grow, they would also be formidable opponents that couldn't be ignored. Just imagine, facing such a potential formidable opponent who could do it without feeling burdened. It could be said that no one could, but it was all good now. Basically, it was all settled. He believed that one day in the future, everyone would be able to rely on each other. This team would also become stronger and stronger. Swoosh! Qin Feiyang left the black tortoise world alone, changed his appearance, and lurked outside Qingtian City. No way! They actually went to the South Continent, killed their way into the sacred land of the God Clan, and kidnapped the three supreme talents of Jiang Yunshu. Why not? This news was spread by the God Clan personally, and in order to rescue Jiang Yunshuang and the others, the Divine King even prepared the inheritance of the three ultimate profound laws. Then didn't Qin Feiyang and the others make a big profit? Yes, I really envy them. Don't envy them. They also need to have the ability to do this. They broke into the Deity Island and managed to escape alive. This ability is not something that you and I can compare with. I really didn't expect them to have such ability. This time, I'm afraid our divine kingdom will face a great disaster. Chapter 4074. Qin Feiyang blended into the crowd and silently listened to everyone's discussion. There was a smile on his face the entire time. As expected, for Jiang Yunshuang and the other two, the divine king was willing to pay a huge price. After inquiring about the news, Qin Feiyang lurked near Mount Supreme to check on its movements. Mount Supreme's current security was quite tight. Not only was there a giant barrier protecting it, but the 10 sovereigns were also personally overseeing it. For 2 whole days, Qin Feiyang still couldn't find a chance to sneak in. He had no choice but to temporarily give up and enter the Black Tortoise world. 2 days outside, 10,000 years had passed in the Black Tortoise world. Mu Qing, Mu Tianyang, and the Mermaid Princess Battle Souls had all been successfully merged. Moreover, the law of darkness inheritance that Jiang Qinwu gave to Jiang Yuquin had also fallen into Long Chen's hands. Long Chen was also very generous and directly gave it to the madman. Once the madman merged with this law of darkness inheritance, it was equivalent to mastering the 6 ultimate mysteries. They were the law of space, law of destruction, law of death, law of thunder, law of slaughter, and law of darkness. Unfortunately, 3 of them were ordinary ultimate mysteries. Otherwise, the madman would be able to master the will of the heavenly Tao. And the will of the heavenly Tao required the 6 ultimate mysteries of the strongest laws. At this moment, there was no one in the tea garden. Qin Feiyang stood in front of the tea table and leisurely brewed a cup of tea. He wasn't in a hurry at all, because the ones who should be anxious were the divine king and the others. While drinking tea, he released his perception. The madman was merging with the inheritance. The mermaid princess was cultivating in seclusion. White-eyed wolf, Li Feng, Mu Qing, and Mu Tianyang were in the soul-sealing valley. As for Jiang Yunshuang and the other 2, there was no doubt that they were suppressed in the soul-sealing valley and were in despair. But Long Qin and Long Qin were actually in seclusion again. Moreover, the 2 of them emitted an aura of law that hadn't been there before. Could it be that both of them were fusing the inheritance of the ultimate Upanishad? After a moment of observation, Qin Feiyang was finally able to confirm that they were indeed fusing the ultimate profound inheritance. True enough, it was indeed different to have a powerful father. Whatever legacy he wanted, he just had to ask. It was no wonder that Long Chen was so generous as to gift Li Feng an inheritance, because he did not lack inheritances at all. It was just that in the past he wanted to rely on his own ability to comprehend, so he did not fuse with these inheritances. However, the situation was different now. Following the monarch, the divine king, and the human race's supreme being made their moves one after another, all of them displaying powerful strength. If he did not fuse with these inheritances and quickly grasp the will of the heavenly Tao, he would not be able to fight against these people at all. A short while later, Qin Feiyang withdrew his perception. He also began to ponder over the ultimate profound that he had grasped. The laws of life and death, the laws of life, the laws of destruction, the laws of karma, and the laws of light. Currently, he had already grasped 6 ultimate profundities. Aside from the law of light, the rest were all supreme laws. The law of life and death had surpassed the limits of the supreme laws. As for the law of wind, the law of force, the law of slaughter, the law of war, and the law of thunder, their current strength was the supreme profound and also the 5th profound. It seemed that he had to work harder and comprehend all the ultimate profound of these laws. However, now that he had already grasped the will of the heavenly Tao, when he comprehended the ultimate profound of the 6 supreme laws, would the will of the heavenly Tao descend again? When the 2 will of the heavenly Tao superimpose, would it be stronger than the current will of the heavenly Tao? This was the question that he was thinking about. Logically speaking, although he had already grasped the will of the heavenly Tao, when he comprehended the ultimate profound of the 6 supreme laws, another will of the heavenly Tao should descend. However, after all, there was no precedent. Whether the will of the heavenly Tao would descend in the future or not, it was hard to say now. Let's talk about it in the future. Qin Feiyang shook his head. The ultimate profound, whether it was in ordinary law or in supreme law, naturally, the more the better. In short, he did not reject anyone. Not long after, White-Eyed Wolf, Li Feng, Mu Qing, and Mu Tianyang returned from Soul-Sealing Valley. How was it? Qin Feiyang poured tea one by one and asked with a smile. Their bones are very hard. They would rather die than be willing to strip off their ultimate profound. White-Eyed Wolf was extremely angry. Li Feng, Mu Qing, and Mu Tianyang were also helpless. Jiang Xing and Zhang Zishan each grasped the ultimate profound of 2 supreme laws. Jiang Yunshuang grasped the ultimate profound of 3 supreme laws. In total, there were 7 ultimate profound meanings. To them, it was completely possible to create an expert with the will of the heavenly Tao. For example, Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang, now that their fighting souls had evolved, if they were to grasp the will of the heavenly Tao, then their strength would undoubtedly skyrocket. However, in advance, Zhang Yunshuang and the other 2 had to be willing to hand it over. Even you can't do anything? Qin Feiyang looked at White-Eyed Wolf in surprise. Even a place like Soul-Sealing Valley can't make them surrender. What else can I do? White-Eyed Wolf rubbed his forehead, his face full of helplessness. Qin Feiyang shook his head and smiled. He said indifferently, "This is not your style. You have to bring out all of your shameless character. Get lost." White-Eyed Wolf's face darkened. What was he talking about? Who was shameless? Qin Feiyang laughed involuntarily, took a sip of tea, and looked at the 4 of them, saying, "But I have good news." What good news? The 4 of them were curious. Qin Feiyang said, "The Divine King has made an offer to exchange the ultimate profound of 3 supreme laws for the lives of Jiang Yunshuang and the other 2. Really? Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang's eyes lit up. Right now, Qin Feiyang had already mastered the will of heavenly Tao, Long Qin and Long Qin. With Ice Dragon as their backing, they could get any legacy they wanted. The Fiend Ancestor, Frenzy, White-Eyed Wolf, and Li Feng already had enough legacies. They were only short of unlocking the seals. Therefore, Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang were the most anxious. Of course, Dong Xingyang was also the most anxious. However, in comparison, Dong Xingyang's character was calmer, and he did not fight for the inheritance. Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. That's good. As long as Jiang Yunshuang and the other 2 hand over their ultimate profound, together with the 3 ultimate profound of the Divine King, there will be a total of 12 legacies. Just enough for Mu Qing and I to master the will of heavenly Tao. Mu Tianyang was extremely excited. Qin Feiyang nodded, but then he shook his head and sighed. Don't be happy too early. Why? Mu Tianyang looked at him suspiciously. First of all, the Divine King's condition is to return the jade to its rightful owner. What do you mean by returning the jade to its rightful owner? It means returning it to her in perfect condition. But now the 3 of their fighting souls have been snatched by you. How can you return the jade to its rightful owner? Secondly, don't forget the condition for unlocking the seal. You have to kill the Divine Kingdom's elites before Longqin will help White-Eyed Wolf and the rest unlock the seal on the iron box. If we release Jiang Yunshuang and the other 2 now, White-Eyed Wolf, Li Feng, and Frenzy will have worked for nothing. Qin Feiyang explained. That's true. Mu Tianyang nodded. Isn't there a way to get the best of both worlds? For example, we can get the ultimate meaning of Jiang Yunshuang and the rest, and the 3 inheritances from the Divine King, kill Jiang Yunshuang and the other 2, and unlock the seal on the 3 iron boxes for White-Eyed Wolf and the rest. Mu Qing frowned. I've thought of a way to get the best of both worlds, but it's not easy. Qin Feiyang shook his head. How about this? White-eyed Wolf's eyes lit up. He looked at everyone and said, Can we do something during the exchange of hostages? Do something during the exchange of hostages? Qin Feiyang and the other three were stunned. They couldn't help but look at White-eyed Wolf with anticipation. White-eyed Wolf said excitedly, For example, we can change our faces and pretend to be Jiang Yinshuang and the other two. After the exchange is completed, we can directly turn against the Divine King. Qin Feiyang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I thought it was a good idea. Can't we do that? White-eyed Wolf frowned. Of course not. Jiang Yinshuang and the other two have the mark of the God Clan. How can you impersonate the mark of the God Clan? Even if we can fake the mark of the God Clan, the Divine King will be able to tell at a glance. Because the mark of the God Clan is bestowed by her. Qin Feiyang was helpless. That makes sense. White-eyed Wolf pondered for a while and said, Then why don't we return Jiang Yinshuang and the other two to her first? After we get the 3 inheritances, we'll find a chance to kill them. That's the only way for now. However, it's really difficult to achieve the condition of returning them intact. The reason why the Divine King cares about them is firstly because of their fighting souls, and secondly because they have mastered the ultimate meaning of the ultimate law. Now that their fighting souls have been taken away, if their ultimate meaning is taken away as well, I'm afraid the 3 of them won't have much value in the eyes of the Divine King. Qin Feiyang shook his head and sighed. From what you're saying, it seems that we can't have it both ways. White-eyed Wolf pursed his lips. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded and pondered for a while. Then he smiled and said, Let's give it a try first. If we can get the 3 inheritances from the Divine King, that would be the best. If we can't get them, we won't force it. Anyway, for us, this is already a big profit. Okay. The 4 of them nodded. Qin Dage, Young Master. At this time, Fire Lotus flew over with Pai Lupi and Theta Wang. The 3 of them were in high spirits. How is it? Qin Feiyang looked at the 3 of them and smiled. The 3 of them were in charge of the arrangement of the spirit veins and crystal veins that they had looted during this time. Robbing was easy, but making arrangements was a very complicated matter. 51 cities, plus the spirit veins and crystal veins of the god race. There are more than 30 million of them. Currently, the spirit veins and crystal veins of the Black Tortoise world have reached a state of saturation. Fire Lotus smiled. The happiest one is still that little brat. The Black Tortoise world is growing faster and faster by the day. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang spoke one after another. It has reached saturation. Qin Feiyang was slightly taken aback and asked, That means, for the time being, we don't have to worry about the spirit veins and crystal veins. You can't say that. The little brat said that the more the better. Fire Lotus smiled. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. This little brat was more like a bandit. Fire Lotus continued. And the little brat also said that it won't be long before the castle evolves into a mid-level dominator weapon. Really? Qin Feiyang was shocked. White-eyed Wolf and Li Feng also looked at Fire Lotus in surprise. Yes, Fire Lotus nodded. That's great. White-eyed Wolf was extremely excited, his eyes filled with anticipation. As long as the castle evolved into a mid-level dominator weapon, it meant that the Black Tortoise world's origin energy had the ability to create a mid-level dominator weapon. At that time, the Black Tortoise world's strength would also increase greatly, because the Black Tortoise world's strength was the same as the castle's. If the castle evolved into a mid-level dominator weapon, the Black Tortoise world would be able to block the invasion of mid-level dominator weapons. If it could block mid-level dominator weapons, it would naturally be able to block the ultimate profundities of the strongest laws. In other words, in the future, even if the Black Tortoise world was exposed to the outside world, except for mid-level dominator weapons. No profundities or low-level dominator weapons would be able to harm the Black Tortoise world. Chapter 4075. It could be said that the evolution of the ancient castle had great benefits for the entire Black Tortoise world. Then, is there anyone in the Black Tortoise world who has comprehended the profundities of laws? Qin Feiyang asked. There are, but very few. According to our statistics, there are less than 100 people, and they have just comprehended the profundities of laws. Pai Lupi said, That's not bad. Qin Feiyang nodded with a smile. After all, the Black Tortoise world's starting point was too low. It would take a long time to catch up with a place like the Sky Cloud world. White-Eyed Wolf asked, Have you placed the profundities of laws in the various forbidden areas and divine treasures? Of course. How could we dare to neglect the young master's orders? And there are already more than a dozen people who were lucky enough to obtain the profundities of laws. I believe that one day our Black Tortoise world will surpass the Sky Cloud world. After all, the Sky Cloud world doesn't have as many profundities of laws as our Black Tortoise world. Theta Wong said, her face full of expectation. We will. And I believe that our Black Tortoise world will have many cultivation geniuses. You too must remember these people and focus on nurturing them. But you can't raise them like flowers in a greenhouse, understand? Qin Feiyang looked at the two and asked. Understood. In any case, you can leave the matters of the Black Tortoise world to us. Pai Lupi and Theta Wong nodded. With your help, of course I can rest assured. Qin Feiyang chuckled. He turned his head to look at Huolian and warned, Don't be so busy all day. You should improve your strength more. I know. Fire Lotus nodded. Qin Feiyang took a sip of tea and smiled. All right then, let's discuss how to make Jiang Yinshuang and the others willingly hand over the profundities. This was the main point. If they weren't strong enough, they wouldn't be able to protect the Black Tortoise world. If they couldn't protect the Black Tortoise world, no matter how good the resources were, it would be useless. Mu Tianyang pondered for a while, then looked at the White-Eyed Wolf and said with a smile, I'll have to rely on you for this. White-Eyed Wolf's face darkened. Why didn't he think of him when something good happened? Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and smiled. Actually, sometimes it's better to be simple and crude. How simple and crude? Everyone was doubtful. Qin Feiyang was just about to speak when he suddenly seemed to have some misgivings. He turned to look at Fire Lotus and said with a smile, Why don't you leave us for a moment? I'm sure you don't have any good ideas. Fire Lotus looked at him with disdain, then got up and left quickly. Qin Feiyang smiled awkwardly and gestured to White-Eyed Wolf and the others. Everyone immediately gathered around, including Pai Lupi and Theta Wong. My idea is, Qin Feiyang mumbled to them. A moment passed. White-Eyed Wolf and the others all looked at Qin Feiyang in shock. Mu Qing was the first to come back to his senses. The corner of his mouth kept twitching, and he said speechlessly, Why do I feel that you're the most shameless one? You only know now. He's the most shameless one. He's just good at pretending. White-Eyed Wolf looked at him with disdain. Ahem. Qin Feiyang coughed and glared at White-Eyed Wolf and Mu Qing. He said, Don't you know how to talk? I'm doing this for your own good. Don't take my kindness for granted. Hee. Mu Qing smiled wretchedly and nodded. Although it's a little shameless, it's a good idea. White-Eyed Wolf, shall we go now? Sure. White-Eyed Wolf nodded and immediately got up and rushed to Soul Ceiling Valley. Li Feng and Mu Qing immediately followed. Should we also go and take a look? Mu Tianyang looked at Qin Feiyang. No need. We'll just watch from here. Qin Feiyang waved his hand, and the image of Soul Ceiling Valley immediately appeared in the void in front of them. Soul Ceiling Valley. The stench was overwhelming. There were no traces of living creatures within a radius of 10,000 miles. Everyone regarded this place as a forbidden area that they absolutely could not set foot in. At this moment, inside the valley, Jiang Yunchuang and the other two were suppressed inside like dead dogs. Not far away, Bing Running looked at this scene with a gloating face. After being suppressed here for so many years, she had long become numb. It was a good thing that someone came to accompany her. Bing Running walked over and asked, "You're also from the Divine Kingdom, right?" "How do you know?" Jiang Yunchuang frowned. "Because the mark between your eyebrows is the mark of the god race. A group of people was suppressed here, and two of them, Jiang Chun and Jiang Xing, also had such a mark." Bing Running said, "What? When they were suppressed here, you were already here." Jiang Xing was surprised. "Yes." Bing Running nodded. "Wait." Jiang Yunchuang seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Are you the princess of the Ice Phoenix race?" "You still know me?" Bing Running was surprised. "I heard about you from Jiang Chen and Jiang Xing. What kind of deep hatred do you have with Qin Feiyang and the others? Why did they suppress you here for so long?" Jiang Yunchuang was suspicious. Blood feud, absolutely irreconcilable. Bing Running said word by word, her eyes full of resentment. Jiang Yunchuang and the other two looked at each other in disbelief. "Originally, I could have become a genius and dominated an era, even stronger than you, the geniuses of the Divine Kingdom, but because of Qin Feiyang and the demon ancestor, I became like this. I hate it." Bing Running screamed as if she had gone crazy. Hearing this, the three didn't take it seriously. It wasn't like they didn't know the situation of the Sky Cloud realm. How powerful could a princess of the Ice Dragon race be? She actually dared to say that she was stronger than them, the geniuses of the Divine Kingdom. Wait, demon ancestor? Suddenly, Jiang Yunchuang's pupils shrank. Why did they mention the demon ancestor? One had to know. Whether it was the lunatic, the white-eyed wolf, Long Chun, or Long Qin, they were all outstanding people. But these people didn't mention them, but the demon ancestor. Could it be? Jiang Yunchuang was surprised. "You are the owner of the Eye of Despair?" "That's right. I am the other half of the owner of the Eye of Despair. If I snatch the Eye of Despair from the demon ancestor, then tell me, am I better than you?" Bing Running smiled proudly. The three looked at each other and couldn't help but sigh. "What?" Bing Running was puzzled. "We have the same fate." Jiang Zishan sighed. "What?" Bing Running was shocked and asked, "Are you also?" "That's right. We are the owners of the Eye of Life, the Eye of Evil, and the Eye of Heaven. But now our battle souls have been snatched by them." Jiang Xing said, "Ha ha." Hearing this, Bing Running laughed. "What are you laughing at?" Jiang Xing raised his eyebrows. "I'm laughing at your uselessness." The dignified geniuses of the Divine Kingdom actually had their battle souls snatched by them. What a joke! Bing Running's face was full of ridicule, completely undisguised. "You!" The three glared at Bing Running. "Not bad, you're even chatting." At this time, accompanied by a mocking laughter, the white-eyed wolf, Li Feng, and Mu Qing descended from the sky. Bing Running looked up at the white-eyed wolf and the other two and sneered. "Thanks to you, you sent me a few people to relieve my boredom." Now, she was not afraid of anything. She even wanted to kneel and beg for death. "You're welcome. After all, it's been quite boring to stay here alone for so many years." The white-eyed wolf smiled playfully. "It's quite boring. But last time, Mu Qing, when you came, I didn't have a good chat with you. What's going on? Qin Feiyang suppressed you in the soul-sealing valley. Why are you with them now? In order to survive, you don't even care about your dignity?" Bing Running pointed the conflict at Mu Qing, obviously to drive a wedge between them. But to this, Mu Qing just smiled disdainfully. She wanted to drive a wedge between them with such a childish trick? Haha, people without backbone are worse than pigs and dogs. Bing Rinning laughed and retreated to the side, because she knew that there would be a good show to watch. Who are you calling worse than pigs and dogs? Mu Qing was annoyed. She was really insatiable. Li Feng reached out to stop Mu Qing, looked at Bing Rinning contemptuously and said lightly, "Don't talk nonsense with her. She can't wait for you to kill her so that she can be free. So you're asking for death. I'm sorry, but I won't do such a good thing. You can live the rest of your life here peacefully." Mu Qing sneered. Bing Rinning glared at Li Feng angrily. He really liked to meddle in other people's business. Li Feng ignored her directly, looked at Jiang Yunchuang and the other two, and said, "I'll ask you one last time. Do you want to hand over your ultimate meaning?" "Don't even think about it." Jiang Yunchuang and the other two's faces were full of ridicule. "Okay, let's see how long you can last." Li Feng smiled playfully, raised his hand and turned in the air, and the three immediately flew out of the soul-sealing valley uncontrollably. The white-eyed wolf and the other two immediately plugged their nostrils. It was too smelly. It was simply disgusting. Jiang Yunchuang sneered. "Even a place like this can't make us submit. What other means do you have? Bring it on." "As you wish." The white-eyed wolf lifted the corner of his mouth, looked at Li Feng, and smiled flatteringly. "That you'll have to suffer a little. Take off their clothes and parade them through the streets." "What? Take off their clothes? Parade them through the streets?" When the three heard this, their faces couldn't help but turn pale, especially Jiang Yunchuang and Jiang Zishan. They were women. How could they bear such humiliation? Although being suppressed in the soul-sealing valley was also a kind of humiliation to them, after all, no one was watching. But to take off their clothes and parade them through the streets was a different concept. Who could afford to lose face in front of so many people? "Are you guys demons?" Jiang Zishan roared. "Yes, we are demons." Li Feng laughed, raised his hand, and waved. A slaughter law emerged, enveloping the three of them. With a puff, the clothes on the three's bodies were all torn to shreds. "No," the three of them exclaimed, and hurriedly covered their important parts, especially Jiang Yunchuang and Jiang Zishan. Their beautiful faces turned pale. "There are many people in the Black Tortoise realm. I believe everyone is very interested in you three prodigies of the God clan. Of course, this is just the appetizer. When we travel through the Black Tortoise realm, we will take you to the West Continent, South Continent, North Continent, East Continent, and even to the God clan's sacred land, the Island of Gods. Let them see with their own eyes how pathetic the prodigies they usually admire are now, especially Jiang Yunchuang and Jiang Zishan. In everyone's eyes, you must be goddess-like figures. I believe many men would be happy to see you like this." The white-eyed wolf's face was full of ridicule. Yes. We're letting them feast their eyes. Maybe the men of the divine kingdom will thank us. Otherwise, where can we find such an opportunity?" Li Feng and Mu Qing nodded and laughed. Jiang Yunchuang and Jiang Zishan's faces were pale, and they trembled. They might as well kill them. Chapter 4076. Let's go. Let's go to Zhongzhou first. The white-eyed wolf opened a space-time tunnel. Li Feng chuckled and swept the three of them toward the space-time tunnel. "No, please, I beg you, just kill us." Jiang Zishan's face was as pale as a sheet. Just thinking about how she was going to be surrounded by countless people in such a manner, she couldn't help but feel her scalp tingle. "It's not up to you if you want to die." Li Feng sneered. They were about to enter the space-time tunnel. Jiang Zishan could no longer hold back the fear in her heart and shouted, "I'll give it to you. I'll also give you my ultimate profoundness. I only ask that you give me a quick death." Jiang Zishan's compromise completely destroyed Jiang Xing's last line of defense. The white-eyed wolf and the others looked at each other and smiled. It would have been better if they had done this earlier. They had to force them to use this method. Li Feng let go of the two of them. The two of them were unwilling to give up and forcibly extracted their ultimate profoundness. Jiang Xing's was the space-time law and the karma law. Jiang Zishan's was the time law and the devouring law. As the two ultimate profoundness were extracted, their cultivation instantly fell to the greater mastery, sovereign realm. Their faces were pale. Looking at the four ultimate profoundness, Mu Qing's eyes shone brightly. This was not an ordinary law, but an ultimate law, not to mention four ultimate profoundness. Even if it was only one ultimate law, as long as it was successfully integrated, it could instantly make a person soar to the sky. Below, Bing Renning looked at this scene with envy, jealousy, and hatred. In just a short while, they had obtained four ultimate profoundness. If it were her, she would wake up smiling. How hateful! How could the people of the Divine Kingdom be so useless? Last time, Ryuko's group, and now Jiang Yunchuang's group were the geniuses of the Divine Kingdom. But in front of Qin Feiyang and the others, they were like trash. She originally thought that Qin Feiyang and the others would die in the hands of the people of the Divine Kingdom sooner or later. Then she would be able to watch a good show. But now it seemed that she was just wishful thinking. "Haha, thank you, thank you." The white-eyed wolf laughed and put away the four ultimate mysteries. He turned to Jiang Yunchuang and said, "What about you? Do you want to hand over the ultimate profound or take you for a stroll?" Jiang Yunchuang's face darkened. He gloomily looked at the white-eyed wolf, then at Mu Qing and Li Feng. He said bitterly, "You'll suffer retribution sooner or later." After saying that, with a thought, the three great laws appeared. These were the laws of time, the laws of destruction, and the laws of death that she had mastered. His cultivation instantly dropped to the small success sovereign realm. Seeing this, the smile on the white-eyed wolf's face became bigger. He grabbed the three ultimate Upanishads and bared his teeth. "I don't know if it's retribution or not. I only know that this time I will take it back with interest." Jiang Yunchuang clenched his fists. The white-eyed wolf disdainfully looked at Li Feng and said, "Since they have already handed over the inheritance, then don't make things difficult for them. Find them some clothes to wear and treat them well." The word treat was especially emphasized. Understood. Li Feng smirked. Devil's Land. Tea garden. Done. Qin Feiyang chuckled. With a wave of his hand, the image in the void dissipated. Mu Tianyang's face was also full of smiles. "Young master, your method is still the most effective." Pai Lupi and Theta Wang laughed. Although it was a bit shameless, the effect was really good. It immediately took care of the three of them. People in the world actually have weaknesses. The weakness of Jiang Yunchuang and the other two is that their self-esteem is too strong. Letting them appear in front of people naked is definitely more painful than torturing them. So, if you encounter such a situation in the future, you have to take the right medicine. Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. Understood. Pai Lupi and Theta Wang nodded, their faces full of admiration. They felt that the man in front of them seemed to be omnipotent. Swish! Before his voice died away, the white-eyed wolf and Mu Qing returned. "Haha, this is really too satisfying." The white-eyed wolf couldn't stop laughing. Thinking of Jiang Yunchuang's arrogance in the sky cloud realm and comparing it with his current appearance, it was really satisfying. Qin Feiyang shook his head and laughed. Looking at Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang, he said with a smile, "The ultimate profound has been obtained. You can arrange it yourself." "Arrange it ourselves?" Mu Qing was taken aback. "Yes." Qin Feiyang nodded and asked puzzledly, "Do you want me to help arrange it?" This, Mu Qing laughed dryly and said, "It's all because of you that we can obtain these 7 ultimate profound. What qualifications do we have to arrange it? You're treating me like an outsider. As I said, the next ultimate profound will belong to you and Dong Zhenyang. Qin Feiyang smiled faintly. This, Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang looked at each other, their eyes extremely complicated. One had to know. Qin Feiyang not only had a large number of subordinates around him, but also his relatives, such as the Mermaid Princess and Fire Lotus. If it were someone else, they would definitely prioritize their relatives and subordinates around them. But now, Qin Feiyang actually prioritized them? They were once enemies. Was this Qin Feiyang's character? Without the slightest selfishness, it was indeed admirable. You can arrange the ultimate profound by yourselves. Now, open your heavenly eye and help me find the whereabouts of the Divine King, the sovereign of the human race, the monarch. Qin Feiyang looked at Mu Qing and said, "Okay." Mu Qing nodded and immediately opened his heavenly eye. In his eyes, a floating island could be vaguely seen. This was the Island of God. The current Island of God had been restored to its original state. Somewhere on the island, a woman was leaning on a chair. She was rubbing her forehead. She seemed to be very irritated. The Divine King is on the Island of God. After Mu Qing finished speaking, he checked the whereabouts of the monarch and the sovereign of the human race. The evolved heavenly eye indeed had the ability to reach the heavens. No one would be able to hide from him. Very soon, Mu Qing saw the whereabouts of the monarch and the sovereign of the human race, and said, "The sovereign of the human race is at Mount Supreme. As for the monarch, that place is very unfamiliar. He should be in the purple gold divine dragon clan's territory." They're not together? Qin Feiyang was surprised. Logically speaking, after such a big thing happened, the three giants should have gathered together to discuss countermeasures. Moreover, only by gathering together could they deal with their attacks. But now, they had returned to their own territory. They didn't want to encircle and annihilate them anymore. Right now, they probably have no other choice. Mu Tianyang shook his head and smiled, because the monarch and the others didn't know where they were hiding, nor did they know their next move. As the saying goes, only by knowing yourself and your enemy can you win 100 battles. If they didn't even know where they were, how could they set up a trap to encircle them? Moreover, they had no relatives or friends in the Divine Kingdom, and there was nothing to threaten them with. In short, as long as Qin Feiyang and the others successfully stepped into the Divine Kingdom, they would be able to instantly turn the passive into the active. At this time, Li Feng came through the air and landed in the tea garden. "How is it?" White-Eyed Wolf asked. "Of course, we will continue to suppress them in the Soul-Sealing Valley." Li Feng smiled, looked at Qin Feiyang, and asked, "Qin Dage, when do you plan to make a deal with the Divine King?" "The deal is not urgent. Moreover, now that their battle souls and ultimate profound have been taken away, the Divine King may not make a deal with us. First, check the whereabouts of the other 3 strongest battle souls." Qin Feiyang pondered for a while and looked at Mu Qing. "It's easy to check them, but first I need to know their names or what they look like." Mu Qing said, "We know that." Qin Feiyang smiled. When he was discussing with Long Qin and Long Qin had projected their appearances. As Qin Feiyang waved his hand, the shadows of Ji Shaoi and another man and woman immediately appeared in the void. Mu Qing looked at the 3 of them and opened his all-seeing eye again. But soon, he frowned. "What's wrong?" Qin Feiyang was suspicious. Mu Qing didn't answer and continued to check. After about 10 breaths, he said in a deep voice, "This Ji Shaoi is actually hiding in the monarch's space divine item." Heard that. Qin Feiyang, White-Eyed Wolf, and Mu Tianyang couldn't help but frown. This was a bit difficult. If Ji Shaoi was hiding in the land of the purple gold divine dragon clan, although it was more difficult to kidnap him, as long as the plan was meticulous, they could still find a chance. But if he was hiding in the monarch's space divine item, then the first person they had to deal with was the monarch. What about the other two? White-Eyed Wolf asked. They are also hiding in the space divine item of the human clan's supreme master. Mu Qing said weakly. Qin Feiyang's mouth twitched, and he said with a wry smile, "It seems that the monarch has seen through our purpose and carried out personal protection for Ji Shaoyi and the other two. In that case, it won't be so easy to capture these three people again." Mu Tianyang sighed. Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. Then we can take them down one by one. Now, let's find Dong Xingyang's archenemy first. White-Eyed Wolf said. Dong Xingyang's archenemy, Qin Feiyang murmured. Dong Xingyang had the Eye of Destiny. After the Eye of Destiny evolved, they could see the future, which was indeed more beneficial for their future development. But who had the Eye of Destiny? Mu Tianyang asked. Why don't we go to Mount Supreme to investigate? Qin Feiyang shook his head and said, To be honest, I've already been to Mount Supreme. The security is very tight and there's no way to sneak in. Then there's no need to sneak in. Mu Tianyang waved his hand. That's right. Anyway, didn't the human clan Supreme Master ask the three sovereigns to invite us to Mount Supreme? Let's head to Mount Supreme openly, White-Eyed Wolf said. I don't agree. What if the human clan Supreme Master tells the Divine King and the monarch to bring people to surround us? Li Feng shook his head. Qin Feiyang nodded. Li Feng's worries weren't without reason, although they weren't afraid of anything in the Divine Kingdom now. If they were really surrounded by various forces, they wouldn't be able to survive even if they had the ability to defy the heavens. One wrong step and they would lose everything. So they couldn't take this risk. How about this? Since we can't go to Mount Supreme, then we'll think of a way to lure the human clan Supreme Master out. I want to see what he wants to talk to us about. Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and smiled. If that's the case, then I have no objections. Li Feng smiled, because compared to going to Mount Supreme, this method was safer. Chapter 4077. Qin Feiyang looked at the White-Eyed Wolf and said with a smile, Give them the ultimate profoundness. Let's go out for a walk. All of them? The White-Eyed Wolf frowned. Yes. Qin Feiyang nodded. The White-Eyed Wolf was somewhat reluctant. Li Feng glanced at Mu Qing and asked, Qin Dage, you seem to have mastered the ultimate profoundness of the 5 ultimate laws. Yes, Qin Feiyang nodded. He had already calculated earlier, together with the ultimate profoundness of the life and death laws. He had exactly 5 ultimate profoundness of the 5 ultimate laws. In that case, why don't you integrate another ultimate profoundness of the ultimate law and see if another will of the heavenly Tao can descend? Li Feng suggested. That makes sense. Anyway, there are now 7 ultimate profoundness of the ultimate laws. Even if you integrate one, Mu Tianyang or Mu Qing can still master the will of the heavenly Tao. The White-Eyed Wolf also nodded in agreement. Hearing this, Qin Feiyang could not help but be tempted. If another will of the heavenly Tao descended, his strength would undoubtedly soar by a large margin. Hence, Qin Feiyang cast his gaze toward Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang. You were the one who captured them, and you were the one who found ways to get the ultimate profoundness. Of course, we have no objections if you want to integrate them. Moreover, if another will of the heavenly Tao descends and your strength increases, it will be very beneficial to us in the future. Mu Tianyang smiled faintly. In that case, Qin Feiyang pondered for a moment and said with a smile, Then I will integrate an ultimate profoundness of the time law. Jiangxing was the space-time law and the karma law. Jiang Zishan was the time law and the devouring law. Jiang Yinshuang was the time law, the death law, and the destruction law. In other words, the time law was repeated. After Qin Feiyang chose the law of time, the remaining law of space-time, the law of karma, the law of devour, the law of death, the law of destruction, and the law of time were just enough to create an expert who could control the will of heaven. Since Qin Feiyang wanted it, the white-eyed wolf naturally wouldn't say anything. He immediately took out the law of time and handed it to Qin Feiyang. As for the remaining 6 great laws, he glanced at Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang and snorted coldly, "You guys got lucky." After saying that, he handed it over to the 2 of them. Mu Tianyang chuckled. Mu Qing was also full of smiles. "Then let's fuse the laws first. After that, we'll go look for the sovereign of the human race." Qin Feiyang stood up and said with a smile, "Yes. Actually, after causing such a big commotion this time, it's also good for us to disappear for a while. If that's the case, the monarch and the others won't be able to figure out what exactly we are planning." Mu Tianyang said. "That's right." Qin Feiyang nodded and smiled. Then he turned and walked toward the ancient castle. The white-eyed wolf and Li Feng also followed him. Li Feng asked, "Brother Wolf, why don't you fuse with these inheritances first?" Fuse with these inheritances first? The white-eyed wolf was stunned. What did he mean? Li Feng said, "You can fuse with these inheritances first. When the seal on your iron box is unlocked, you can give it to them." "So that's what you're talking about." "I want to. But the inheritances I got this time don't contain the ultimate meaning of the law of life at all. Now I only lack the law of life and the law of destruction. If I fuse with the law of destruction now, I won't be able to master the will of the great path without the law of life. Forget it. I won't compete with them. I don't want them to say that we're bullying them." It wasn't easy for little Qin Zi and Mu Qing to shake hands and make peace. "We can't make a scene again because of a small matter." The white-eyed wolf shook his head. I really didn't expect you to have such a big picture view." Li Feng looked as if he had discovered a new continent. "Get lost." The white-eyed wolf's face darkened. Qin Feiyang glanced at the white-eyed wolf, turned to look at Li Feng, and said with a chuckle, "This proves that your brother wolf has grown up." "You're still in the mood?" The white-eyed wolf scowled. The ultimate meaning of the 6 strongest laws. Could he be more generous to give it to Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang, just like that? Just thinking about it made his heart ache. "Take it easy. You've seen Mu Qing's all-seeing eye now. With him, helping us in the future, we'll be like a tiger that has grown wings." Qin Feiyang smiled slightly. "Even so, I still feel a little distressed." The white-eyed wolf pursed his lips. "How can there be gains without effort? Let's talk about it later. Isn't there a lot of people in the divine kingdom who have mastered the ultimate meaning of the strongest laws?" Qin Feiyang patted the white-eyed wolf's shoulder and smiled meaningfully. The white-eyed wolf froze for a moment, and then his eyes glowed green. "That's right. Although there were only a few people in the Sky Cloud realm who had mastered the ultimate meaning of the strongest laws, the divine kingdom didn't lack such people at all. Not to mention Mount Supreme, the Divine Island, and the purple-gold divine Dragon Clan's ancestral land. Even the major cities could easily find a few people who had mastered the ultimate meaning of the strongest laws. As long as they had the ability to capture these people and force them to hand over the ultimate meaning, not to mention 6, even 60 would be a piece of cake. The most important thing was, this kind of plundering not only strengthened their strength, but also weakened the divine kingdom's strength. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This time the white-eyed wolf was excited. Maybe in the future, the people around them could also master the will of the heavenly Tao. Qin Dage, after Mu Qing, Mu Tianyang, and Dong Xingyang master the will of the heavenly Tao, shouldn't you think about sister-in-law? Li Feng asked with a smile. Yes. All these years, I have indeed owed your sister-in-law too much. I will definitely think of her first in the future. Qin Feiyang smiled. And my wife. You can't favor one and discriminate against the other, the white-eyed wolf hurriedly said. I know. Qin Feiyang looked at him helplessly. He was afraid that he would forget about fire dance. Women were the support of men, the spiritual support. Therefore, whether it was the mermaid princess, fire dance, Zhuo Shaoxian, or fire lotus, he had to take care of them first. To be more selfish, if it weren't for the fact that Mu Qing and the others had mastered the strongest battle soul and could unleash super strength, he would definitely take care of the mermaid princess and the others first. In the tea garden, Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing sat opposite each other. Mu Tianyang pondered for a moment, looked at Mu Qing, and asked, "What do you think we should do with the 6 ultimate laws?" I think. Mu Qing lowered her head and thought for a moment, then looked up at Mu Tianyang and said, "I want to say it, don't be angry. I think we should give it to Dong Zhenyang first." Mu Tianyang was not angry. On the contrary, he was very gratified, because at least this proved that Mu Qing had recognized her mistake and wanted to make it up to Dong Zhenyang. Frankly speaking, Mu Tianyang had always been brooding about Qin Feiyang and Qin Batian and could not let go. Qin Batian destroyed his Tianyang empire. Qin Feiyang destroyed his Mu family single-handedly and killed his woman, Shen Mei. But these were 2 different things. He had always been grateful to Dong Zhenyang. Therefore, when Mu Qing wanted to scheme against Dong Zhenyang, he strongly opposed it. "You won't object, right?" Mu Qing was a little nervous. "Why would I?" Let's go. Let's go find Dong Zhenyang now." Mu Tianyang chuckled, got up, and walked toward a courtyard not far away with the 6 ultimate laws. In the ancient castle, Qin Feiyang sat cross-legged in the cultivation room, took out the inheritance of the time law, and began to meditate. This was equivalent to an inheritance, and to integrate the inheritance, one must first master this law. In short, first of all, Qin Feiyang had to comprehend the time law before he could integrate this inheritance. Although he had not mastered the time law yet, this inheritance contained all of Jiang Yunshuang's understanding and experience of the time law. And this time law inheritance was Jiang Yunshuang's. So, as long as one was not a fool, one could easily comprehend it, let alone Qin Feiyang, who had unlocked the door of potential. In the courtyard where Dong Zhenyang was. In the hall. After listening to the purpose of Mu Tianyang and Mu Qing's visit, Dong Zhenyang looked at Mu Qing and was very pleased. What he was most worried about was that Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang would fall out with Qin Feiyang and the others after their fighting souls evolved. One had to know. The strongest fighting soul before and after its evolution were 2 completely different concepts. It was no exaggeration. Now, if Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang betrayed everyone and went to Ice Dragon or the Divine Kingdom, then whether it was Ice Dragon or the people of the Divine Kingdom, they would immediately spend a lot of money to train them. They would even treat them as VIPs. But fortunately, what he was worried about did not happen, especially Mu Qing. He could tell that no matter if it was him or Qin Feiyang and the others, Mu Qing no longer had any enmity towards them. Looking at the 6 Tao laws, Dong Zhenyang smiled and said, "The ultimate profound of the 6 Tao laws is really tempting. But my eye of destiny has not evolved. Even if I have mastered the will of heaven, the combat power I can unleash is limited. I appreciate your kindness, but you can merge with it." This, Mu Qing and Mu Tianyang looked at each other. In the face of such temptation, how could they reject it? These people were really open-minded. Suddenly, even they felt that they were too narrow-minded in the past. Dong Zhenyang pondered for a while and smiled. "I have a suggestion." "Mu Qing, you can listen to it." "Of course, it is just a suggestion. Don't think too much." "Go ahead." Mu Qing looked at him. Dong Zhenyang said with a smile, "Actually, your ancestor will benefit the most from fusing these 6 Dharma laws, because his evil eye can be used to kill enemies on the battlefield. As for your all-seeing eye, although it's heaven-defying, it's only an auxiliary ability. It's not very useful in killing enemies on the battlefield." Heard about it. Mu Qing pondered for a while and nodded. That seems to be the case. Outside the battlefield, the all-seeing eye was invincible. It could see everything in the world. But on the battlefield, the all-seeing eye was basically useless. But the evil eye was different. During a battle, the evil eye could control the enemy's 7 emotions and 6 desires. It could control the enemy's thoughts and even turn them into puppets. This was especially true in a life-and-death battle. It could play a crucial role. Anyway, even if you don't master the will of heaven, it will not affect your all-seeing eye. So I suggest letting your ancestor merge with it first. Of course, this depends on your own thoughts. Dong Jingyang smiled. There is nothing to think about. It's decided then. Mu Qing waved his hand and said, not to mention anything else, just the fact that Mu Tianyang was his ancestor. He couldn't possibly snatch it from Mu Tianyang. You're tuning in to the Thunder Spear YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.